Perfect. Yes, I know I'm late. I was dealing with the server, which is getting purged, but it'll be fine. That's not important right now. I am reading, and I'm very excited to start reading. So, we have the final, oh my god, error, long time no chat. We have the ending. We have the ending of Volume 7. I'm very, very excited. We have 18 chapters left. I've kind of given my ideas and thoughts on what I think is going to happen at the end of this volume. We're going to see how much of it is correct. We're going to see how much of it is right. I have no idea. And we're just going to kind of go from there. Oh, okay. I don't know where music is. I don't know where Kami is. So I'm just going to play music myself. And if he ends up coming back, that's fine. If not, I will have something playing for while we go and do this. Let me just get something really quick so I can start reading. Crazy. This is so crazy. I only have 18 chapters left. Let me get this guy. Get this all set, and then we'll go and get it ready. Perfect. There we go. Got it. Also, there's a few things that I do just want to go over. Primarily it has to do with more so the Discord and everything like that. I do just want to say, like, this is a community for everyone, and this is a community for everyone to enjoy themselves, feel comfortable, but also just being respectful of certain demographics, being respectful of just people and their preferences and their choices, being respectful of people's age. That's a really big one as well. So that's just like a PSA I do want to put out there. And like I said, stream was a little bit pushed back due to certain things that needed to be dealt with in the Discord chat and in the community, which is getting promptly dealt with now. But yeah, that's just a PSA to push out there as well. And then also I just think, like, putting a bit of a PSA on, I fully understand that, like, there is jokes and there is like conversations and stuff, like, about me having a larger forehead or about me not being able to read or write or anything along those lines. Like, I personally don't really care what any of you say. It's not something that I'm ever gonna sit here and be upset about, because I know it's not true. However, I do just want all of us to be aware of what we're saying, how we're saying it, and even though they are directed at me, how that could possibly make others feel when it is so prevalent all the time. Like, I'm all for witty banter, I'm all for humor, I'm all for jokes, but when it is every single time continuously, it might make other people upset or uncomfortable. And that's just something I want to put a PSA out there, just because I do want everybody to be happy and enjoy themselves while they're here. So without further ado, I'm now done talking. I am going to start reading. Yay! Okay, chapter 336. Interaction. Backlund Steam Locomotive Station, Platform 3. Alfred chatted with his parents and sister for a while before rushing to leave the train during the gap in between. It's not about what anybody particularly did. It's just like a PSA where it's just like, let's be cognitive of what we're saying, how we're saying it, who we're saying it to, how much we're saying it, X, Y, and Z, and just like keeping everything enjoyable for everybody. And that's just kind of the PSA to throw out there. And I know that maybe I've said things in the past and done things in the past without being cognitive or realizing them, and I do take accountability, and I'm sorry for that. But going forward, I think that's just something that everybody should be aware of, including myself. He came to the platform and said in Esquire, "Give me an East Balham cigarette." If the past few years had any negative impact on him other than the mental suffering and pain, he still retained a few bad habits. After smoking plenty of East Balham cigarettes that consist of spices and herbs wrapped in the roasted tobacco leaves, Alfred was no longer used to the paper cigarettes leaves. Cigarettes that remained popular in the northern continent. He believed that they were bland and tasteless, as though they were liquor distilled in water. As for cigars, he felt that it needed good environment to slowly savor it. It didn't suit his present situation. Of course, his smoking addiction wasn't too serious. A disciplinary paladin had a good enough constitution and spirit to resist such influences. He felt that this was too stuffy in the train carriage. Besides, the mother often raised an issue of him not being married. After the squire took out a lit at the East Balham cigarette, Alfred brought the stick and was nearly charred black to his mouth and sucked it deeply. The strong smell entered his body, causing his spirit to jolt. At that moment, he saw a blonde-haired woman who looked like a classic sculptor walking over with his valet. Alfred hesitated and smiled. He raised his right hand and said, "Hibbert, I thought you wouldn't be returning to East Chester." It was Earl Hall's eldest son, Alfred's brother, Lord Hibbert Hall. Hibbert drew a perfect smile and said, "I'm just a cabinet secretary, not the cabinet chief secretary. I won't be busy, that I don't even have the weekend off." In fact, he had no plans on being the cabinet chief secretary either. His main goal was to accumulate experiences at other various departments in the government and build up his own network and resources to prepare for entering a House of Lords in the future. Alfred took another puff of the East Balham cigarette and smiled. Happy weekend. Alfred watched Hibbert enter the carriage. After since someone was looking over and was discussing, "Why aren't any of the passengers waiting for him on the train carriage? It doesn't seem to be full." "This is a special carriage. It was pre-booked by an important figure for a large sum of money. I know that you might not have seen such a situation before, but you have to remember that this happens frequently in big cities like Backlund and Constant. When those important figures bring their entire family out, they will definitely have more than 100 servants follow. Perhaps there might even be pets, so how can I squeeze into a train carriage with ordinary people?" "Is that so? I wonder who is the big shot." Alfred turned his head to look. There was a dozen people in grey-blue uniforms on Platform 2 who were quietly surveying Platform 3 across the empty tracks. The distance between the two parties wasn't small. If Alfred's hearing wasn't outstanding, he wouldn't be able to figure out who they were discussing. "They are..." Alfred turned and asked in adjutant. He could only recognize the uniform they were wearing belonged to the railway company. The adjutant turned around immediately and asked the staff for the platform. Soon he jogged back and whispered to Alfred, "General, they're train dispatchers from all over the kingdom. They're undergoing short-term training in Backlund." Alfred nodded slightly and glanced at the Platform 2 again. The oldest of the train dispatchers had white hair and the youngest looked to be in early 20s. Most of them were middle-aged men in their 30s or 40s with grey sideburns. In the Sanssouci, city of generosity Bayam, Verdu carried his luggage, which didn't contain many valuables, and boarded the boat at night. He left the harbor and boarded the pirate ship. At a sequence 7 of the apprentice pathway, he wasn't very good at combat. Even though Verdu had a mystical item with him, he was rather afraid of the negative effects. He wasn't willing to use it unless it was critical to do so. Therefore, in order to avoid danger, he tried his best not to bring anything that would easily attract the greed of pirates, which he didn't trust. The pirate on the dock glanced at Verdu and scoffed. "There's no need to be afraid. We always keep our promises, as long as you pay for the journey. We definitely won't throw you into the sea. Here, it'll be even safer than you taking a passenger ship. At least you don't have to worry about encountering pirates." Seeing Verdu silent, as though he appeared somewhat afraid, the pirate gleefully threw him a key to him. The second floor on deck, the room at the end. Verdu caught the brass key and entered the cabin. He climbed up the stairs and headed down to the corridor. The level seemed to be specifically prepared for people who boarded the pirate ship for various reasons. Along the way, Verdu encountered a few passengers that were totally unlike the pirates. Among them were a street girl who was dressed rather scantily, and a middle-aged man, protruding belly, with oily face, and extremely cold young man wearing a cloak and top hat. "Do you want to join me?" The lady smiled and asked when she saw Verdu looking over. She fluttered her eyes and asked at him as she asked. It wasn't clear if she was planning to do some business on the trip or if she was doing business while happening to make a trip. Verdu ignored her and withdrew his gaze before walking to the room. The well-defined and cold young man also stopped at the entrance diagonally opposite. Backlund Westboro, 9 Bellato Street. Come in. Shio straightened her body from a huge, wide seat. The door creaked open, and 2 MI9 members who were under Shio walked in. Colonel, we found some information regarding the investigation of Utopia. A man in a dark-colored jacket handed Shio a report. Shio was startled as she perked up. What is it? The man in the dark-colored jacket simply said, In the past few days, we took advantage of the free time we had in completing our previous missions. To all the passengers in Backlund from the particular steam locomotive through our informants. Without a doubt, he was referring to the steam locomotive that had stopped at Utopia. Okay. Shio nodded and gestured for his subordinate to continue. The man in the deep jacket pointed at the report and said, We have preliminary confirmation that none of the passengers that successfully arrived in Backlund show any abnormalities. They're in good spirits and have no problem with their memories. However, we discovered something. At that time, not everyone returned to the train. According to the 2 passengers, their neighbors chose to remain in Utopia. One was a lady who loves traveling and exploration. She has a deep love for foreign places. She witnessed the outstanding red wine, desserts, and unique fizzling iced tea in Utopia. She decided to give up her original plans and stay in a small, unique city for a while longer to discover even more wonderful things. The 2 passengers learned about when they were chatting with her. Not only did she share neighboring seats, but they also chose to stay in the same hotel. They met in the morning. That morning happened to be the same one as our intelligence agent stayed in. It's called Iris's. Shio slowly nodded and said, Have you investigated the lady's situation? What's her name? No, we can't be sure if she has left Utopia, answered the other MI9 members with a bushy goatee. Those 2 passengers only know of the lady's name as Monica, but they don't know her last name or background. Shio tersely acknowledged. Your subsequent mission is to investigate the lady's background, find her family and friends, and confirm if she has returned. Yes, Colonel. The 2 MI9 personal assault saluted and left Shio's office. Shio read the report and submitted the sign silently. Compared to her subordinate, she had actually closer to the truth of Utopia. She already knew that it was a ritual and had certain connections with Garamond Sparrow. However, she had no way of reporting this news to her superior for credit. Without mentioning the origins of the information, Shio needed to consider whether Garamond Sparrow was willing to let out this news leak. Perhaps I can try contacting him and ask him for his opinion. Shio tidied her desk and thought and left MI9. After changing her clothes and returning to East Borough with the bridge ahead, she headed to a different bar, just like her back in her bounty hunting days, to gather all sorts of information and different people. During this process, she asked about Utopia in passing, but no one had heard of it. Finally, Shio entered the bar located at the back of the bridge area and sat on a high stool. She said to the bartender, Anyone suspicious recently? A lot of people are suspicious, but they don't have any bounty, the bartender replied casually. Shio circled around the topic for more than information, and when done, she asked according to plan. Have you heard of Utopia? I've heard of it, the bartender replied and wiped the glass. Shio moved her gaze from the bar counter up slowly. She looked at the bartender and asked, Where from? There was a guest who came earlier and he controlled his drinking, the bartender said indifferently. I promoted our specialty cocktail to him and he said that he has other things to do, so he can only drink a glass of beer. I praised him and asked where he came from. He said Utopia. Wendell had just finished his breakfast when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw police officers in black and white checkered uniforms standing outside. He opened the door in puzzlement. Might I ask what's the matter? Wendell asked politely. This house was a place he had been assigned to after coming to Backlund. This was because he was staying in the city for quite some time. Receiving intel and investigations and monitoring, the police officer was still young and a little inexperienced. He was only in his early 20s. He forced a smile and said to Wendell, Hello, I'm Biles, a police officer. There's a case that requires you to provide testimony in court. What case? Wendell frowned slightly. The young policeman named Biles said with a polite smile, It's the Tracy homicidal case in Utopia. Wendell's eyes widened. At that moment, Wendell felt his calves tremble slightly as if he could no longer support the weight of his body. After leaving Utopia, he had anticipated the worst possible outcome, sudden death with no inexplicable reason. However, he had never expected that he would meet someone from Utopia in Backlund, a real large city. More importantly, the visitor had even invited him to Utopia. For Wendell, this was an extremely scary nightmare. He would not experience a mental breakdown. Could it be that the attribute to the good mental fortitude. Keeping his composure, Wendell forced troubled expressions and said, "I've already plenty of things to do recently." The police officer named Biles immediately said, "The trial will happen in 2 weeks. Here's the subpoena." As he spoke, he handed the document to Wendell. Frankly speaking, Wendell didn't want to accept it at all, but he had no choice but to accept it. Biles took a step back. "This concerns the future of a lady. I sincerely hope that you can testify in court. It depends on the situation." Wendell didn't want to agree or refuse. Biles didn't say anything else as he bowed. I'll wait for you in Utopia. I hope we meet again." With that said, he turned around and left the residence, entering the streets. Through the empty process, Wendell seemed to have been frozen into an ice sculpture, standing there without blinking. After another 10 seconds, he finally woke up from his nightmare. He collapsed to the side weakly and held himself up by placing his right hand to the door. Just now, he had been so afraid that Biles would forcibly bring him back to the non-existent Utopia. If that happened, Wendell didn't know if he had a chance to leave. Perhaps he would disappear forever. Compared to the sudden death, that's impossible to predict, but clearly a negative outcome left him even more fearful. "I need to quickly report this matter to the brass. Capture the policemen from Utopia and find out the real situation of the bizarre town in suitable ways to resolve the problem completely." Wendell snapped back into his senses and tried his best to perk himself up. He prepared to inform MI9 members who were secretly monitoring him. At this moment, he finally realized that there was a huge problem with his response. He didn't grab the opportunity to inform his monitoring colleagues with the one gesture that the police officer who had visited him was problematic. He didn't try to stall for time either. Instead, he waited for the monitors to realize that something was wrong. He also didn't show his talent as an intelligence agency, asking supuriously Biles which hotel had stayed in Backlund, what day he was setting off by train. He was so terrified that he could only subconsciously use a response that would create an accident. With that thought in mind, Wendell walked out of the door and looked at the direction where Biles had left. But he didn't see his figure. The police officer from Utopia had already blended into the carriages and pedestrians. Retracting his gaze, Wendell looked down at the subpoena in his hand and suddenly felt a little uneasy. What will happen if I don't go to Utopia to testify 2 weeks later? The more Wendell thought about it, the more scared he became. His calves weakened again, and he hurriedly made hand gestures to inform his colleagues that were hiding around him of the anomaly. Westboro 9, Bellato Street. After learning about Utopia residents in Backlund, Shio was both shocked and confused. According to her previous observation, Utopia was likely located in the secret location, or somewhere between real and illusory, allowing outsiders to enter through random entrances. As for why they wanted outsiders to enter, it was probably a ritual requirement. Therefore, according to Shio's understanding, the people of Utopia would likely leave their hometowns and wander around. This is also a ritual requirement. What's the true identity of these residents? Mr. Fool's believers, the world Gammon Sparrow's companions. After Shio asked about the general appearance of Utopia visitors, she had no choice but return to MI9 headquarters due to the lack of further information. She hesitated on whether she should send her subordinates to perform a large-scale search. She wasn't sure if Mr. World would be happy to see such an action be taken. She was afraid of affecting the ritual. After pacing back and forth in the office, Shio prepared to pray to Mr. Fool and ask him to transfer her questions to the world. As she walked to the chair, Shio swept her gaze across the report, placed it on the table. It was an investigation report with 2 subordinates had prepared. On the one hand, they had confirmed that there was no problems with the passengers that had successfully arrived in Backlund. On the other hand, they pointed out that there was a passenger who had remained in Utopia. Passengers. Shio's eyes narrowed as she made a guess based on her intuition. That Utopia inhabitants had their own goals in coming to Backlund, and it was up for a random trip, and his goal was very likely related to the particular passenger who has left Utopia. Shio was alarmed as she hurriedly sat down and attempted to pray. Just then, someone knocked on her office door. "Please come in," Shio said after some hesitation. As the door opened, Shio saw the goateed Locke and Wendell, who was in charge of the Utopia incident. "Colonel, Wendell met someone from Utopia. He paid him a visit directly," Locke said, fumbling over his words. The development was equally unexpected. Indeed, Shio wasn't surprised, instead she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Wendell and asked, "Why did he visit you?" "He requested that I head to Utopia to testify about the homicide case I mentioned in my report." Wendell was clearly calmer than before. He then added, "He's a policeman named Biles. I don't dare ask where he was living. I don't know when he's planning to leave or which steam locomotive he's planning on taking to leave." To express the weight she had on this matter, Shio stood up and thought. "Locke, Summon your team members to look for the rental carriage drivers who often prowl for customers around Wendell's residence, as well as the carriage drivers who pass by the nearby district, and ask if they've seen Biles before. If they have seen him, ask them where he was sent to. Also, send someone to the steam locomotive train station and wait by the entrance to observe the passengers. After instructing her subordinates, Shio turned to look at Wendell. Cooperate with them. Sketch out Biles. Yes, Colonel. Locke and Wendell replied in unison. After they left to close the door, Shio sat back down and began to pray. Soon she received Mr. Fool's response and saw Cameron Sparrow praying to the fog. Cameron Sparrow told her, "You can carry out normal investigations. When necessary, you can suggest that it's a ritual, but it must be included among a few options." She immediately heaved a sigh of relief and patiently waited for her subordinates to report the result of her investigations. As night fell, Locke returned to Melito Street and reported to Shio. "We found the rental carriage driver from the Utopia business." "Oh?" Shio showed her concern. Locke explained simply. The Utopian originally got the carriage driver to go to the dock area. However, as soon as the carriage entered the corresponding area, he requested to get off, saying that he had arrived. I will do a special episode reaction. Also, hi. The street was very unfamiliar with the carriage driver, making him feel like he was lost. After leaving the street, he realized that the surroundings had become familiar. Our men accompanied him to the place, but he couldn't find the street no matter what. Shio nodded slightly and solemnly. It matches our preliminary descriptions regarding the entrances, exits of Utopia. Colonel, are you saying that no one can leave Utopia by any city or street? Locke was in disbelief. Shio thought for a moment before saying, "From the looks of it, yes, but I have a feeling that there's something wrong. How does Utopia connect to different places? What does it rely on?" As her voice trailed off, Shio said to Locke, "Tell Wendell he'll spend the following 2 weeks here until that subpoena expires." "Yes, Colonel." Locke turned around and left Shio's office. Wendell didn't have any objections to Colonel Deretch's arrangements. He could even say that it would only feel safe inside MI9's headquarters. His temporary residence was simply refurbished duty room. Through the windows, he could see the lawn, gardens, and trees outside. At a glance, Wendell saw a pitch-black raven standing on the tree branch, silently looking over. Night in Bansi was abnormally creepy from time to time, and cries of ravens and other seabirds could be heard. Verdue stood at the window watching the appropriate dilapidated dock in the city had already been reduced to ruins. The pressure in his heart grew. After a few days at sea, the ship was boarded and about to reach Bansi Harbor. The captain already informed Verdue that the next morning they would only wait 2 hours. If he exceeded the 2 hours, Verdue could only wait for the next ship on the deserted island. Who knew what the next ship would come? After taking a deep breath, Verdue retracted his gaze and took off his coat. Then he opened his suitcase, took out the classic black robe, and put it on. On the surface of the robe was embroidered with golden and silver threads, and there were many gems the size of rice grains attached to it. It was a sealed artifact with the Abraham family. After making preparations, Verdue left the pirate ship and entered Bansi Harbor. Along the way, the ancient robe tightened, causing his face to turn purple, and he nearly fainted. As they walked, Verdue found a spot where the telegraph office stood, based on the map that he had brought in the middle of the rubble. There was 2 bloody red marks. One remained fresh, while the other was left behind by 2 people who were crushed into mince meat. Beside the 2 figures, on a broken wall, there was an octopus-headed monster wearing armor. It stood on the waves and was holding a trident. Hi! Verdue raised the lantern in his hand high and was about to take a closer look when he suddenly felt a drop of cold liquid land on his neck. Gripped with terror, he subconsciously reached out his hand and found it sticky, nothing like rain. It was a colorless, not blood. It was a little similar to saliva. Verdue's forehead twitched slightly as he slowly raised his head and looked at the place where the drop of liquid could have dropped from. It was a swath of pitch black, and it was a night sky with our moon and stars. Verdue subconsciously swallowed his saliva, feeling an indescribable sense of fear. He didn't know what he was afraid of. There was any real danger, yet the drop of unknown liquid falling from above was enough to chill his spine and tighten his pores. Perhaps it was because the environment was a little too eerie and sad, or perhaps it was because the identity of the origin was unknown to the liquid. Verdue cautiously moved 2 steps outside and patiently observed. In the next few moments, normal Nothing abnormal happened, no more liquid fell from above. This made Verdu suspect that it was only a bird passing by. There was a freshwater fish from the islands. Streams and sea fish in the mouth of a slightly sticky liquid dripped from the surface. He calmed himself down and then clicked on the ruins of the telegraph office. 10 minutes later, Verdu confirmed that there were only traces of blood and simple murals that were related to mysticism. It was worth researching. He didn't rashly extract samples of the blood-colored soil or make copies of the strange mural. Instead, he took out the purely dreamy crystal ball from his pocket. As an astrologer, he naturally had to use his best techniques to confirm that he should take action. Holding the crystal ball in his left hand, his right hand touched the top of the crystal ball as Verdu entered the state of astrologer. In the next second, the crystal ball shone brightly. It exploded and scattered shards in every direction. Verdu's gaze froze. He stood rooted in the ground, completely ignoring the pain brought about by him, shards piercing into his body. It exploded. It actually exploded. He muttered to himself in disbelief. The crystal ball shards that stabbed into his body didn't seem to break through the classical robe. At that moment, they fell without any blood on them. Of course, there were a few shards left on Verdu's jaw and face, penetrating them with small wounds. Who is it? Verdu suddenly came to the senses and turned his face another direction. In the ruins opposite him, a figure walked out. It was the woman's scantily clad clothes and pirate ship. She was hidden herself very well and wasn't discovered by Verdu. However, the explosion from the crystal ball gave her a fright and made her react excessively, causing her to fail to maintain her hidden state. Verdu's injured face immediately twisted. Why are you here? The lady curled her lips and put on an indifferent attitude. This is Bancy Harbor, not your home. Why can't I be here? I felt bored and came down to take a stroll, hoping to pick up some jewelry from the ruins. Is there any problem with that? She resorted to a few questions without any intention of distancing herself from Verdu. Verdu didn't argue with her. He took out the medicine and medical alcohol as he prepared beforehand and treated his facial and chin injuries. He then pulled out a crystal ball shards and put them back into his pocket. He didn't want his blood to remain in such a strange place. Following that, Verdu pulled out the accessory and classic robe. It was a door-shaped symbol formed from the three rubies, 3 emeralds, and 3 diamonds. In an instant, the long robe tightened, accentuating the flesh on Verdu's body. Just as Verdu's bones were about to be crushed, his fingers gradually faded and he disappeared. Then he teleported to the coastal mountains outside Bancy Harbor. The moment had collapsed and turned into rubble. According to what Verdu knew, this was once the place where Bancy residents used to worship the god of weather and also the main target of the Church of Storms. After the crystal ball exploded to warn him that the Bancy telegraph office was hidden in an unknown danger, Verdu didn't dare to continue exploring the area or search for Mrs. material. He could only forcefully move to the next location, and this allowed him to escape the woman's tailing. As soon as Wendell's figure appeared, he bent down and took a deep breath. It was as if he had finally recovered from the suffocating state. At the same time, Verdu felt a sharp pain in his right rib, as if the bone had fractured. After taking several deep breaths, he endured the pain and walked a few steps forward with the sweat of his forehead, arriving at the altar marked on the map. Without a doubt, the altar had been destroyed. There was only a glassified, slightly charred crater. There was gravel with different shapes scattered around it. The gravel had traces of being engulfed with fire and lightning and various degrees. After Verdu, Abraham surveyed the area. He raised his right hand and waved his sleeves. With a whoosh, a small portion of gravel was pushed away from the spot, revealing the ground beneath it. This was a trickmaster's wind trick. Verdu used it to replace the need for manual labor and fully ensure his safety. As the gravel flew, Verdu saw the charred grounds. There were a few parts left in some areas and extremely incorporeal patterns, drawing in symbols. The sounds of the wind grew more intense and it resonated in Verdu's ears, causing him to look up in surprise. The wind that could only blow small gravel had somehow turned into a hurricane and even pushed him into a state of staggering about. Wild clouds gathered in the sky as if the storm was brewing. Although he had heard about Bancy and was a weather museum, he had never thought that the changes would happen so suddenly. For a split second, Verdu suspected that the wind trick was triggered by storms, or perhaps that it caused some changes to the cleared ruins of the altar. This guess made his forehead break out into a cold sweat. As the storm raged, Verdu saw the rubble from him flying up, revealing a boulder that was buried underneath. The surface of the boulder was crisscrossed with deep cracks, giving off the feeling that it would shatter once it was touched. At this moment, the wind was calmed down, but the heavy rain was still brewing. Think about how he was already in Bancy Harbor and couldn't afford to scared off just like that. He mustered up the courage and approached the boulder covered in charcoal black cracks. He then took out the magnifying glass and was engraved with strange patterns. He then seriously checked the state of the boulder. 7 to 8 minutes later, Verdu put away the magnifying glass and mystical item and sighed in regret and dismay. He had already confirmed that there was nothing wrong with the boulder, but didn't involve anything related to mysticism. Verdu was about to retract his gaze and leave when he suddenly saw that the interface of the boulder's bottom and earth bright redness seeped out. The bright redness gradually expanded like a blood flowing out. However, it didn't spread into a huge area. It was limited to a very small area. The two blood-red figures in the telegraph office ruins instantly flashed across Verdu's mind. His scalp couldn't help but tingle. His lips quickly turned dry, and he instinctively thought that this wasn't a good development. After swallowing another mouthful of saliva, Verdu raised his right hand and created another gust of wind, causing quite a number of miniature rocks to roll over to fill the bottom of the boulder completely, covering up the bright redness and seeped out. He didn't stay here long. He forced himself to activate teleportation again and head to the final destination. This time, another one of his ribs fractured again, causing him to almost faint from the pain. In addition to the suffocation caused by the tightening, Verdu felt that it wasn't hovering around the edge of death. He took several seconds to recover his cast of his gaze forward and placed it into the ruins. Collapsed house covered the weeds. According to the pirate who had once again explored the ruins of Bansi, there was an item worth researching. It was an ordinary wooden door, but it was also the only thing that remained intact in Bansi. The pirate didn't find anything special about the wooden door, so he got his subordinates to carry out the attempt and move back to the ship. However, they had only taken 2 steps when they suddenly collapsed, digging their spines and their heads separated from their bodies and rolled to the side. This frightened the pirate. He didn't dare say any longer and led the rest of the crew away in a hurry. Verdu didn't fully believe the story the other parties had told him. Although he had experienced much life at sea, he knew that the sailors liked to exaggerate, often exaggerating something several times. However, even if it was an exaggeration, Verdu believed that the door was worth studying. After a round of searching, he discovered his target. The ordinary-looking wooden door leaned against the collapsed wall in the brass locks and handles. There was no corpse around it, nor was there any traces of blood. It was identical to the majority of the ruins. Indeed, he's exaggerating. Perhaps the pirate heard about the wooden door from somewhere else. Both he and his subordinates didn't dare to move it. Verdu looked around and suddenly said, "Who is it? Why are you monitoring me?" He didn't actually notice anyone around him, but based on his experience and lessons, he could use the words and the reaction to deceive the possible presence of a monitor. A second later, a middle-aged man with a belly appeared in the shadows. He said nothing and silently left the place. Verdu heaved a sigh of relief as he didn't waste any time to approach the wooden door. According to the information he had obtained, no matter which way he opened the door, it wouldn't bring about any abnormal changes. There would be no danger if he didn't attempt to move it. After thinking for a few seconds, Verdu retracted his hand to his sleeve and used the classical robe as a glove to put open the wooden door. He raised the wooden door and surroundings fell silent. Verdu pushed the wooden door like it was normally opening a door, but there were no changes. He tried to make other methods, but failed to make the wooden door display any abnormalities. It seemed to have just been lucky to be preserved in the entirety under the bombardment of churches of Lord of Storm. Taking a deep breath, he tried to calm himself down. He thought for a moment and tried to open the door again. However, unlike before, Verdu held the handle and gently twisted it down. After hearing the light click and the metal colliding, he pushed the window door backwards and let it lean against the collapsed wall. This time, the grayish-white fog appeared before him. In the fog, there was a faintly discerned street and a row of terraces. Outside one of the houses, there was a wooden signboard. On it were a few Lowanese words: Bansi Harbor Telegraph Office. While Verdu's pupils dilated, the calm voice sounded from the telegraph office was shrouded in fog. "Are you here to send a telegram? Please come in." Is this gonna be like Mr. Door stuff? Although the voice coming from the telegraph office wasn't anything out of the ordinary, it was just a little intermittent. It lacked the obvious changes in tone. Normally it would strike terror in others, but Verdu's heart suddenly erupted with a strong fear. It was like a bullet with flames shooting into an ammunition dump. It accurately hit a barrel of flammable gunpowder and ignited the fear that Verdu had accumulated and suppressed previously. The horror that swept into every corner of his body was like a hand that grabbed his heart and blanked out his brain. He turned around to abruptly ran frequently towards the remnant pier and was a pirate ship was. During this process, he completely forgot to think. He didn't remember wearing a classical robe. that could teleport. All he did was run through the ruins to his feet, occasionally tripping over random items and falling heavy into the ground. Sometimes his face would turn purple in his tightening clothes, and he had no choice but to stop and catch his breath. However, after some time he composed himself a little. He would crawl and continue running. He looked like he lost all his rationality and was acting purely on instinct. Without the force he provided, the wooden door couldn't maintain its balance. It slid down to the collapsed wall and fell to the floor covered with bricks. The grayish-white fog and shadowy houses disappeared. After 5 minutes, he ran back to the pier under the storm. His eyes were wide, filled with panic and confusion. He didn't notice that there was any figure standing on the deck of the pirate ship, quietly looking down at him. This was a young man wearing a half-top hat and a long black trench coat. He had a cold expression. Verdu didn't even think about it and immediately used the gangway to return to the pirate ship. He rushed into the cabin and rushed to the second floor before rushing into his room. He slammed the door shut and curled up in a small, narrow bed. He wrapped himself tightly with a blanket and shivered. When another of his ribs fractured again, the excruciating pain stuck with him and finally recovered from his horror. He realized that his limbs were sore and his body was hot. Every breath he took was like thunder. He struggled with all his might, and finally he took off the classical robe and fell back into bed. He felt dizzy and nauseous. The air just felt insufficient. Outside the cabin, the cold-looking man suddenly raised his hand, took out a human skin glove, and wore it on his left palm. Suddenly the man vanished into thin air. And appeared in the corner of the ruins. He appeared beside the ordinary wooden door and bent down and raised the wooden door, allowing him to stand in front of the collapsed wall. Right on the heels of that, the man with the black trench coat mimicked his Verdu's actions. He reached out of the handle and twisted it downwards. Oh my god. He then pushed the wooden door forward and let it lean against the wall. Almost at the same time, he saw grayish-white fog. He saw the faint, discernible streets and the houses of the fog. Amidst the houses, the clearest, most eye-catching one was Fancy Harbor Telegraph Office. The rest were more or less blurry. At this moment, a calm voice in the telegraph office answered through the door. "Who are you?" "I'm Gairman Sparrow." "Oh, Pookie, I miss you." The young man in the half-top hat replied in the same... I can't read this word. The interior of Fancy Harbor Telegraph Office suddenly felt silent, as though someone had walking into the door. Oh my god. I love him so much. At that moment, Gairman Sparrow turned his head to the other side. In a deep end of the street, a figure walked over. He was wearing a straw hat and had a towel around his neck. He was bending over to pull something. As the figure approached, the outline of the object became gradually clearer. It was a black vehicle with 2 wheels, and it had a roof that could block the scorching sun and rain. In the vehicle sat a lady wearing a waist-length dress and embroidered fan. Both she and the driver were concealed by thick fog, making it difficult for everyone to see the exact appearance. When they passed Gairman Sparrow, he barely managed to see a few details through the fog. The hunched man pulling the carriage had a rotten face with pale yellow pus flowing in the area, and the lady wasn't covered by the fan and clothes. Her skin was swollen and glistening amidst the blue and black spots. With the ring, a bell sounded. A blue train with 2 carriages sped out in front of Gairman Sparrow. At that moment, Gairman Sparrow realized that there was iron black tracks on the ground. Above him were long lines. On the top of the carriage, there was a rather complicated metal frame that slid along the lines. Through the glass window of the train, Gairman Sparrow saw the passengers inside. They faced the street, but not only their heads remained. Each of them were dragged a bloody spine. Gairman Sparrow's pupils dilated as he silently watched the scene without moving for a long time. After nearly a minute, he took a step forward in an attempt to enter the blurry street beneath the grayish-white fog. However, the fog blocked him. No matter what method he used, he couldn't pass it through. 15 minutes later, Gairman Sparrow stopped his attempt and closed the wooden door, eliminating the fog. There was a drag in the wooden door, and it teleported directly to the pirate ship. He wasn't worried about being cursed at all. He then placed the wooden door on the deck and reached out his left hand and grabbed the door handle. Suddenly, there was a cracking sound from Gairman Sparrow's neck. His head seemed to be raised by an invisible hand, and it dragged out a bloody spine. Gairman Sparrow's expression didn't change as he coldly raised his right hand and pressed it above his head, pressing his head back to its original position. Immediately after, he turned the handle as though unaffected and pushed the wooden door open again, allowing it to lean against the shipboard. However, this time there was no grayish-white fog to be seen, nor was there any visible street houses or trains. It could be said that there was nothing unusual. In the next second, the wooden door rapidly decayed, turning into a pile of mud, as if it was trying to avoid the fate of being tested. He didn't stop it. He took out a golden ring embedded with ruby and wore it for nearly 10 seconds. After the ring vanished, Gammon Sparrow reached out with his right hand, pulled out the same ordinary wooden door from the void before continuing his attempts. After confirming that the wooden door would lose its effect once it left Banshee, Gammon Sparrow casually waved his hand, allowing it to vanish in midair. After 2 hours later, the dark clouds in the sky gradually dissipated. The storm that had been brewing for a long time ultimately did not descend. When the pirate ship was far away from Banshee Harbor, Verdu, who had finished treating the injuries, took a bottle of medicine and allowed himself to quickly fall asleep, so that he could adjust his mental state. On the hazy dream world, he ran into a desolate moor. Looking at something frantically, he found nothing. Suddenly, Verdu heard a faint voice coming from deep within the moor. The great god of war, the symbol of iron and blood, the ruler of chaos and strife. The sentence repeated over and over again, but it didn't alarm Verdu enough to snap him out of his dreams. After some time, Verdu woke up and opened his eyes. At that moment, the morning sun shone into the cabin outside the windows, bringing with it a faint light. Verdu slowly sat up and realized that he didn't need to use the powers of the astrologer and recall the 3 lines of the honorific name that he had heard in his dreams, and his relatively rich mysticism knowledge told him that they were referring to the hidden existence of the level of the deity. It was a result of the incomplete symbols and labels around the altar as a result of me witnessing Is this a result of the incomplete symbols and labels around the altar, or a result of me witnessing the street of the grayish-white fog? Verdu frowned and fell into a deep thought. He didn't rashly attempt to recite the honorific name because he knew how miserable people who had done something like that died. God of War. Verdu vaguely remembered that he had seen the deity's name in the Book of the Family. He decided to do some research and considering how to deal with it later. Banshee Harbor and the collapsed coastal mountains, red, blazing white, or orange flames emerged from the crevices of the gravel, forming a figure. This figure was wearing a black, blood-stained armor and half-grown, fierce red hair. Oh my god, I was wondering when we were going to see him again. He looked young and handsome. There was a blood-colored mask on his glabella, and raising the flags, there was traces of decay on his face. It was none other than Red Angel Evil Spirit, Sauron, and Horn Medici. If he didn't have separate castle and attended a mysteries characteristic to allow the marionettes to run around the world without considering the limitations of distance, I wouldn't need to take such a roundabout route. The Red Angel Evil Spirit hissed, a mystery as to who he was speaking with. In midair, a raven landed on the top of the boulder. They were circled around white on its right eye, and a human voice sounded from its mouth. You actually used him and not him. This isn't like your style. The Red Angel Evil Spirit chuckled. That's because he wishes to call him as him and not him. As he spoke, Sauron and Horn Medici glanced at the raven. This form of yours looks cuter than your true self, don't you think, little raven? The white-eyed raven replied without a hint of anger. Your mockery is just like you, still living in previous epoch. The Red Angel Evil Spirit smiled and said, the developments have been rather smooth, and he has been fooled. However, I believe that even if he discovers it, he will probably turn a blind eye. For the 2 of you to become great old ones, Dor has to return. The hypothetical him might still be hesitant on whether to do it because if he isn't careful, it will bring about a huge disaster. I like disasters. Little Raven, when are you going to make your payment? If you don't have enough strength, I won't be able to gain the trust of the brainless Abraham. When he prays for you, not he, just he. When he prays for you, said the white-eyed raven, if you're worried that such a state won't last long, I can parasitize the worm of time into your body and help you maintain it. There's no need to thank me. As he spoke, the raven spread his wings and disappeared into the vast night sky. The Red Angel Evil Spirit turned his head and, with the advantage of the terrain, wore a solemn expression as he looked down at the Banshee ruins. Look, here's the thing. They're kind of a dream team. I love them together. I love them together so much. They're such... No notes. Do I think them working together is good for anybody else? No. But do I personally love it? Yes. Oh my god, no, they are Team Rocket coded. Stop. It's so good. I love them so much. And I love their little nicknames for each other. Like, it's just... I love them. I also just love Red Angel Medici. I was like, when are we gonna see him again? It's been a while. We haven't seen him. We've got Garen Sparrow, we've got Red Angel Medici. We've got him on. I'm just waiting. Who were the people that I said the ending was gonna be? I'm waiting for Mr. Door to make an appearance, and I'm waiting for Adam to make an appearance. That's all we're missing. We got the dream team. Klein, Medici, Amon, Adam, and Mr. Door. Dream blend rotation. The small city in Utopia is intrinsically no different from the ones I had been in the past, but the folk culture and people, the architectural style, it follows very closely the standard of the Loman style. I've heard that the southern continent has many particular and unusual traditions. I hope that I can experience it myself one day. Of course, that's after East and West Balin peace is restored. Oh, I saw a thing here. What do you think they were talking about when they said Klein got fooled to something? I think it's either like one of two things. Like, I think I think Klein's gonna finish his advancement. Like, I think Klein's advancement is gonna finish. But I feel, here's the thing, Klein's gonna get betrayed by someone, I don't know who. That's the vibe I'm getting right now, is Klein's gonna get betrayed by someone. And they need Mr. Door's whole thing to kind of go. So I wonder if they're going to use Klein to release Mr. Door. That might be something that happens. And then Amon might kill Mr. Door or do something. Like, I know they've got their whole beef and like that whole thing going on. So I don't really know what's happening there. We'll see. No, Kami would not like interview with a vampire. Not even a little bit, I'll tell you that much. They are French, but they are also very, very gay. It's one of my favorite shows. Yeah. And honestly, watch it. Do it. This small city upon Utopia is intrinsically no different from ones I had been to in the past. Be it the folk culture and people or architectural style, it follows very closely with the standard Loman styles. No, I think being French is gayer than actually being gay. Yeah. It's just an added bonus, you know? It's just both of them. Speaking of which, the most special thing about this place is that the weather is always changing and there's always a storm. As a result, most people have umbrellas and raincoats and smeared with Donningsman tree sap? The hotel attendant told me that for a person of a certain income level, which also had a need to work outdoors, they would have to save quite a sum of money to purchase the raincoat. Otherwise, the sickness would only take more away. There are no meteorologists here. I have no idea why there's so many changes in the weather here. I can only guess that it has something to do with the lining, the sea, and being close to the places in hurricanes. Yes, there's a deep... Is it still... I don't know why, but meteorologist is just like, I feel like a weird... I know like it's an actual term for someone who like studies weather and weather patterns, but like meteorologist, I don't know why that like terminology just doesn't seem to fit in the context of this world. Yes, there's a deep water harbor a few kilometers away from Utopia. However, they're lacking in manpower, and it isn't very well managed. I can only maintain its operations of a small scale. They don't have local newspaper either. After all, it's just a small city with a few thousand people. The paperboy mainly sell the Tussock Times, Desi Mirror, and Sea Wind News. The second reason I like this place is because many people in Utopia are optimistic and very enthusiastic about life. When I wrote this down, a band happened to pass by outside the hotel. It's not a professional band, but a group formed purely from amateur enthusiasts. Amongst them are civil servants, law enforcement officers, solicitors, professional policemen, school teachers, candy factory workers, shop owners, among those who have the money and responsibility for larger musical instruments, such as cellos, violins, and other difficult musical instruments, and lower middle-class citizens and relatively simple instruments like 7-string guitars and harmonicas. On some rest days, they will walk the streets and set off from the municipal square. They will circle the city before returning to St. Ariana Cathedral near the square. This is called a musical tour. On the tour, not only do they reject their citizens from joining, but they even encourage them to sing and dance. Reject other citizens from joining, but they encourage them to sing or dance along with the procession. According to my observations, the participants are very happy and very satisfied and freely express their love for life. This gives me a feeling of being full of vigor. I have to admit that it's very infectious. I've tried to join the tour, and I've forgotten my troubles and the relativity of music, dancing, singing, and I only remember happiness. They aren't on a tour today. Instead, they're showering their blessings with newlywed couples at the cathedral. Speaking of weddings, what I don't understand the most is that only has the Evernight Goddess Cathedral. One ought to know that in most of the kingdoms, even in a small town, there would be at least 2 cathedrals, one belonging to Evernight Goddess and other the Lord of Storms. Before today, I couldn't imagine that nor a new town in the kingdom would only believe in one deity, because the Lord of Storms fucking sucks, dude. However, this doesn't cause too much trouble for me. Before I turned 18, I could only believe that the Lord... Who is talking right now? I could only believe that the Lord of Storms under the influence of my family. However, after I graduated from grammar school, I came to truly understand the goddess and most compassionate, beloved deity. Back to the wedding. I participated in a wedding a couple of days ago. I discovered that Utopia has some special customs in this area. Out of all of them, what I admire the most is when the priest pronounces them man and wife. The groom and bride will bow to each other. No one is superior in the relationship, as they only sincerely express their gratitude to be able to spend the rest of their lives together. This might be an expression of equality between man and woman in the goddess's teachings. Nice. In addition, there will be some special segments after the wedding. For example, let the groom and the bride publicly describe their love story. This may be rather embarrassing matter for them, but to the guests it's rather interesting. Yes, I think so too, but I definitely won't add similar segments to my wedding. That's like adding a first dance. Dude, first dances are so, some of the most awkward things I've ever seen in my entire life. I've been to a lot of weddings in my life. If I ever get married, you can count on it that I will not have a first dance. I think they are so awkward, they're so uncomfortable, they're so unnecessary. No. The most important reason why I like Utopia is its food. The food here is very delicious. The limited number of restaurants are all very good, and the best undoubtedly is attached to the restaurant at the Iris Hotel I'm staying at. Be it the most basic beef steak, fried pig charcoal barbecue meat, spiced fried fish, and even more complicated and more difficult sewer mutton with peas, thick cream soup, butter potatoes, and roasted potato skin, all of them have reached a level of master chef in the city. Holy shit. In addition, the chefs here are quite skilled with creating unique dishes of food. There are sweet and sour meat cubes, grilled fish smeared with various conditions in the staples that don't seem to follow for experimentations, the chiefs of Utopia haven't given up. I've eaten all kinds of toasts in the city, yam, potatoes, butter, creamed, and ones with fruit. As long as I was willing to, I could make it so that I don't eat the same thing twice during the week. The best food praise here is for their desserts. Cream pudding, fruit pudding, black forest cake, carrot cake, milk cake, muffins, egg tarts. I feel hungry when writing this. This is the reason why I still don't wish to leave after staying for a week. What I'm most worried about now is not my wallet, but my weight. I'm glad that the hotel doesn't have a weight scale. They have weight scales? Oh my god. and at the same time I blame them for not including one. The red wine in Utopia is rather outstanding. The only problem is that they lack the age to settle down. It seems like the vineyards around the city haven't realized this. Here, I need to seriously recommend a drink. Utopia's fizzling iced tea is very special, and it has even more amazing experiences beside the sweetness and the bubbles. I don't know, it's just like, it's like a interesting thing. No, I know they had weigh scales. I guess I'm like just thinking of like one of the like the ones that you like stand on and then it like weighs you, and like the electric ones. But I'm just like, okay. Here I need to seriously recommend a drink. Utopia Fizzling Iced Tea is very special and has even more amazing experiences besides the sweetness and the bubbles. Every night I would go for a stroll to the municipal square. That's also a place where that most Utopians like to go for entertainment. They have an extraordinary love for the pigeons. I met an artist in the municipal square. His name was Anderson. He's handsome and his artistic skills are superb. Unfortunately, he's a mute. Is this like Anderson? I also know another writer. His name is Alzu. It's a rather strange name. He said that he's writing for a novel and asked me to appraise the beginning. I won't comment on the novel, but I'm just curious about the few familiar names at the beginning of the novel. This includes Anderson, Wendy, oh yes, and the boss of my favorite bakery. I raised this question, and Alzu told me, very seriously, that when the writer can't think of names or characters, it's very reasonable for them to use as someone they know as reference. I agree. This is... Since the column is too narrow and contains my thoughts, I'll end it here. Love, Charlotte. Monica put down her fountain pen. Who the fuck is Monica? What do you mean? Love, Charlotte. Monica put down her fountain pen and seriously read the manuscript twice. She changed certain words and added grammatical errors. She was a writer. She wasn't famous at first, so she could only rely on writing third-rate romance novels to maintain her life. After she changed her faith to the Evernight Goddess, period, let's go, her father had almost cut off all ties with her. However, ever since Miss Fours Wall, who had written Stormwind Mountain Villa, established a travel column and had received quite a warm response after the war, Monica had also started to write about her travels. In some backlit newspaper, it's perfectly matched her hobbies, and her new hobby gave her a unique vitality to help her become a famous travel columnist. Charlotte was her pen name. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. We're introducing a lot of just like random new characters, I've noticed in the last little bit. After her writing dried completely, Monica especially wrote another copy and stuffed in the envelope before affixing it with a stamp. After confirming that the address was correct, the black-haired lady with the Desi Bay style carried her handbag, left the hotel, heading to Utopia's post office. The post office was next to the telegraph office. Whenever Monica passed the letter, she would always find it a waste. From her point of view, Utopia rarely needed to send telegrams. It was too extravagant to especially build a telegraph office. After sending the letter, Monica looked to the sky and walked toward the municipal square. When she arrived at the entrance of St. Ariana's Cathedral, she met Biles. He was a police officer. He'd often questioned Monica with the Iris' hotel due to a homicidal witness. Fortunately, Monica didn't know that the man's name was Wendell. After greeting each other with a nod, Monica entered the cathedral and found a seat. She listened quietly to the sermon priest named Townsend. That name sounds familiar. This was a priest she found to be most clergyman-like ever since she changed her faith to the Evernight Goddess. His hair was half white, and he spoke slowly and mellowly. His voice was deep and low, always calming down people with them realizing it. Monica closed her eyes and listened attentively to the sermon. East Chester County and the forest belonging to the Hall family, Alfred, Hibbert, and Audrey led their respective foxhound and the servant to the forest, chased after their prey. This was the first time the three of them had hunted together since they became adults. In front of the sister, Alfred and Hibbert had a great time, at least on the surface, and to Alfred the biggest problem was how to control himself and not show that he was too extraordinary. Otherwise, if a disciplinary paladin were to join the hunt, no one would have a chance. He knew that his sister was a Beyonder, but he also knew that a sequencing Beyonder of the spectator pathway didn't have any actual combat ability. As they chased the prey, they rushed to the forest. This was the first time hunting in a forest that she didn't know was led to. I saw it drop, so if it lags, just let me know. Hibbert wasn't too familiar with the area as well. He turned his head and said to the attendant, "Yeah, it'll lag a little bit. I saw it drop." "Ask someone." As they waited, the three siblings laughed as they discussed their trophies. As for the golden retriever Susie, she glanced at the foxhound. She wanted to get close to her and make them distance themselves. After a while, Hibbert attendants returned and reported, "Sir, there's a village called Hartlarka nearby." Hartlark, the village with the dragon worship customs. I came here from somewhere else. Audrey was taken aback when she heard that. Oh my god. Crossover episode! Crossover episode! Crossover episode! After regaining her senses, Audrey maintained her faint smile and she became wary. She could vaguely feel the mysterious force pulling her into Hartlark, the village with traditional dragon worship. This was like an arrangement of fate. Audrey had once again entered the Hall of Truth, and she discovered that the murals inside had turned into reality. Furthermore, she knew that the spectator pathway sequence was author. From this name, she had made some connections so that the inevitability of her suspect was somewhat amiss. At this moment, Hibbert laughed. "I've heard of this village. I remember that our family has a manor nearby." As he spoke, he looked up at the sky. "It's almost evening. Why don't we stay there and continue hunting tomorrow?" Alfred wasn't opposed to the elder brother's suggestions. Oh my god, my nose is so itchy. To him, suggesting the night at whichever manor was essentially the same. He nodded and said, "Send someone back to inform father and mother." Audrey didn't say a word. Her green eyes turned slightly and her gaze swept across the faces of her two brothers. Hibbert's brows immediately furrowed and said, "I think it's best we return. The manor wasn't informed in advance, so we'll definitely be prepared. Perhaps there's no way for them to service so many horses, hounds, and servants. Besides, there's still an hour before evening. That's enough time for us to return." After Alfred saw his brother change his mind so quickly, he wanted to act contrary to him. However, on second thought, he felt that his brother had made sense. Considering that his sister was also here, he tersely agreed and said, "Then let's head back quickly." With that said, he didn't wait for Hibbert. Seizing the horse's side and brainwashing the horse whips, he led the way. Hibbert frowned and relaxed. Without saying anything else, he led his sister to the ground of attendants, servants, and hounds, and turned around, following the edge of the forest and returning to the Marion on the other side. Audrey quietly followed behind them, not expressing her opinion on the developments of the manor. Late at the night, in the manor of Eastchester County, having used her manipulative powers to change the thoughts of her two brothers to prevent them from approaching Hartlark, Audrey lifted the velvet blanket and crawled onto the bed, entering a deep sleep. In her reverie, she suddenly sat up. She then looked around and saw the familiar dressing table and bathroom entrance. She realized that she was still in the room, but the crimson moon outside window was gone, and there was no stars, only darkness. This isn't the real world. Audrey instantly made a judgment and inspected herself. Soon she came to the conclusion this was a dream. It was a rather strange dream that made her remain lucid. It's really here. Audrey didn't feel any panic. She was just a little vexed. She hadn't handled the developments properly in the afternoon, which led to the problem extending to the manor and where her parents were. In hindsight, she believed that this should have followed Hibbert's idea and headed straight to the family manor near Hartlark. Then she could reasonably arrange for Hibbert and Alfred to return here, leaving her to stay behind and wait for possible developments. This way, even if anything happened, it wouldn't affect their parents, brother, and most of the servants. However, at the same time, her main goal was to follow the arrangement of fate. As long as he could avoid Hartlark, she would try her best to avoid it. At her surprise, the danger would at times spring on you, even if you didn't seek it out. To avoid it and stall for a time wasn't a universal solution. Audrey immediately got out of bed and stood barefoot on the thick carpet. She had already confirmed that with her level of demigod as a dreamwalker, she could directly escape the strange dream and return to the real world, avoiding suspect invitation once again. After looking around, Audrey pursed her lips, removed the blue cloak hanging on the coat rack beside her, and wore it. She took a deep breath and walked towards the door. During the process, the crimson star tattoo appeared on the back of her hand. A tattoo vanished, as though it never appeared. This was the mark left after her first entry into the ancient palace above the Great Fog. For a very long time it had shown any special trait, but as soon as it began this year, Mr. Fool informed them that the situation in which they could pray, they could use the triggering of the corresponding tattoo to skip the chanting in the honor of her name. Simply put, this was a treatment that the blessed of a deity enjoyed. Of course, there was ways to transmit the information. It could only be used to critical situations, allowing the fool to cast his gaze over. And more importantly, the starlit crimson mark was rather eye-catching and could be easily discovered by others and people who were secretly monitoring them. Therefore, under the situation where she needed to hide her uniqueness, Audrey was more inclined to use the various abilities of manipulator to implant the idea of praying to Mr. Fool for someone suspicious human nearby. She got them to complete prayer in suitable times and locations for prayer and her protection. At this moment, she believed that the owner of the dreamscape knew that she was problematic, so she felt that there was no need to go through the trouble. All she needed to do was hide the entity that she was praying to. Whether she retracted her doorway, Audrey reached out for the handle and gently twisted it before pulling it backwards. The slightly dark corridor entered her vision. The main building of the manor was a history of over 100 years. Many places still had their former characteristics, especially the corridor section. It didn't have any gas lamps, and there was walls that decorated with candle stands made silver or copper. There were countless candles placed on them, emanating a dim yellow light that illuminated the entire corridor and creating all kinds of shadows. They gave a feeling that the phantoms might appear in the corridor at any moment. Even this has been replaced by a dreamscape. Audrey looked around the entire corridor. As this thought flashed across her mind, a thick, long, yellow, pale carpet appeared beneath her feet. Stepping on the carpet, Audrey followed her spiritual intuition and walked to the right. After taking 2 to 3 steps, she suddenly stopped and she felt there was something hiding behind the 2 tightly shut doors, giving her a sense of desire to explore. This is Father and Mother's bedroom. That is Hibbert's room, and that is Alfred's room. Audrey made a slight note of it and frowned. The ancient door was extremely mysterious. Under the dim candlelight, it made one eager to know what was hidden behind them. As her thoughts raced, Audrey suddenly understood what they represented in her dream. This was the door to the mind world. Behind each door was the mind world of their owner. In other words, after Audrey pushed open Alfred's door, she would see the various scenes hidden deep in his heart. Girl, I don't think you want to do that. No. We're good. We don't need to do that, Audrey. By the same logic, she could pry into the secrets of Lord Hall and Lady Catelyn. She slowly retracted her gaze. Audrey closed her eyes and continued walking forward, preventing herself from being affected. After all her experiences, she gradually understood a principle. A demigod in the mind domain needs to control themselves and respect others. Under the premise that she could read people's true thoughts through their body language, facial expressions, and emotional fluctuations, if she wasn't satisfied, she could greedily explore the inner thoughts of others and dig out the secrets. In the end, she would suffer a backlash. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I don't think I could be a spectator because I'm just too nosy. I'm way too nosy that I would be like, I want to know, I need to know. And then I would just yeah. It was very easy for them to be disappointed in human nature, be tainted by all kinds of negative thoughts, gradually becoming crazy without realizing it. This was one of the reasons why, despite spectators being able to placate themselves and treat corresponding mental problems, they were also one of the pathways who should easily go mad or lose their composure. They were both safe and dangerous. Therefore, Audrey established rules for herself to observe. She only did observations and read minds of people she knew. She tried her best not to enter their dreams. This restriction didn't apply to strangers. If it wasn't necessary, she wouldn't enter their mind world for anyone. Following the corridor, Audrey, who was wearing a blue cloak, reached its end. She opened her eyes and cast her gaze on the room to the left. It was a half-open solarium. Pursing her lips again, Audrey held the door handle with her breathing steady. Actually, we're breathing style. We're switching over to Demon Slayer, guys. This was no longer a room. One of the grounds were round pebbles and bundles of bluish-black weeds. It was so dark and deep within the space that one could clearly see. Audrey slowly walked to the closet door behind her. In the darkness, the silhouettes of some objects were quickly outlined. A huge stone pillar that was tens of meters tall stood there. This was a tall, lizard-like monster situated above it. The monster was squatting at the top of the stone pillar like a tiny mountain. Its body was covered with huge grayish-white stone scales, and its eyes were pale, vertical. This was a mind dragon had spoken in mist. With the whoosh of the 2 wings, the mind dragon spread open, almost converting the entire sky. Their bones were like metallic leaf veins, covered with gray membrane and mysterious patterns. As Audrey looked up, the mind dragon emitted buzzing sounds. You've been to Livestead. Without a doubt, it used Dragonese. City of Miracles, Livestead. How does it know? Just as Audrey had these two thoughts, she heard her mind dragon say, everyone's consciousness in one's heart will make a certain exchange with the sea of collective subconsciousness, and for unique places like Livestead, it likewise left a special impression on you. In your virtual persona roams the sea of collective subconscious and isn't too far from me. I can naturally sense this. This exceeds the limit of my ability, and it's not something a dreamwalker can do. The mind dragon corresponds to a sequence 2 discerner. He actually didn't directly control me. As Audrey's thoughts flashed, the mind dragon spoke again. I'm sure you don't have any ill intention at the moment. Audrey fell silent for 2 seconds before looking up and asking, aren't you worried that it's a trap? Audrey, what are we doing? Why are we... I think we're getting a little too ballsy here, girl. I'm adding a letter. I added an A. That's what I added. At that moment, Audrey even suspected that the arrangement of fate wasn't for her to head to her lark to investigate the dragon worshipping customs. Instead, it was to make her realize that something was wrong, because her to feel conflicted, it made her use the virtual persona and vicinity of Harlock to secretly guide her two brothers into changing their minds without realizing it. This would inevitably result in the consciousness being specially related to Livestead and be discovered in the mind dragon, thus attracting him. Despite being one of the arranged, Audrey couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. It was to be said that they achieved such an effect. One had to be said that it achieved such an effect. One had to be... Pause. One had to have an extremely high level of confidence in the reason different people had. It struck fear to the bottom of her heart. After all, Audrey, Sequence 4 manipulator, had felt that the developments of the matter was in line with her expectations. She had completely fulfilled her wishes and wasn't alert after all. The mind dragon retracted its huge wings and looked down the bluey cloaked Audrey. This was a dream maze formed by many minds, even if one who had especially personally described it will take some time to define the room. Besides, I won't stay long. Clearly, he had been wary of traps, but he believed that certain matters were worth the risk. Dream maze. This is a powerful beyonder of the dream weaver, and perhaps a powerful after the qualitative changes. Audrey reined in her thoughts and asked calmly, "What do you wish to know?" The gigantic grayish-white dragon buzzed and said, "My name is..." Oh, son of a bitch. Arihog? One of the 3 remaining ancient dragons. He means that he is one of the 3 surviving dragons of the Second Epoch, and the rare, known dragons are only descendants of the dragons during the era of the ancient gods. Audrey nodded slightly and didn't interrupt him. Yeah, I would also be silent. I'd also be shutting my mouth very, very fast. Behind her was a wooden door that stood without any support in the plains, filled with bluish-black weeds. It looked extremely strange. Arihog didn't waste any time. After introducing himself, he said, "Where did you find Livestead?" Audrey was already prepared, and she answered frankly, "In a book named Grozel's Travels. Rumor has it that it was personally created by the dragon King Inkawelt." Grozel. Arihog clearly hadn't heard of this name before. After repeating it, he pressed, "What kind of book is that?" The blonde-haired Audrey gave a simple description. "That's a book that with a world that's almost real inside. At the same time, it can suck in people who meet the requirement or offer their blood to be sucked in by the book, allowing them to live in the world." Arihog fell silent for 2 seconds. "Is there a sea of collective subconscious in the book world?" "Yes," Audrey answered with a great level of certainty. "The city of Miracle Livestead I saw was deep in the sea of collective subconsciousness in the book world." He suddenly breathed harder. "What did you see in Livestead?" Audrey recalled and said, "A city filled with towering pillars and majestic palaces. In addition, I've also entered the residence of the Dragon King. The place can allow every living being inner thoughts to echo in the surrounding area. I call it the Hall of Truth. At the end of the Hall of Truth, behind the Dragon King's throne, there's an ancient, mysterious bronze door. I'm not sure what's sealed behind it. In short, it's very dangerous, and I didn't dare approach it at all." Audrey was speaking the complete truth. She just didn't mention the speculations that Mr. World, Mr. Star, she had come up with. Arihog fell completely silent. It was unknown what he was thinking of, or if he had analyzed the current situation regarding Livestead. During the process, his head drooped down bit by bit, as though he was going to fall from the top of the 100-meter-tall pillar to the ground. Just as Audrey tensed up from the rather bizarre scene, he was about to ask a question. Suddenly, he raised his head. The golden vertical pupils in his eyes turned colder as his voice once again resounded in the wilderness. "Livestead. With a low rumbling of thunder, the things that were hidden in the dark behind Arihog quickly became clear, and the gradual brightening scene, their outlines appeared. There were huge stone pillars that were more than 100 meters tall. They were either standing alone or collectively propping up numerous majestic and ancient palaces. These stone pillars and palaces were mainly grayish-white in color, and they landed on the island-like foundations that were identical to the City of Miracles Livestead, which Audrey had described. No, this was probably the City of Miracles Livestead. Only then did Audrey realize that the ancient mind dragon, Arihog, was squatting on the top of the thickest, tallest stone pillar. At this moment, she could faintly see a subtle change in him. Her green eyes darted about slightly, and the sound of the metal handle being twisted surrounded from her. This, Audrey held back the urge to turn her head abruptly. She turned her body warily to the side, allowing her gaze to fall sideways. The individual wooden door that had lost its external support slowed down, opening, revealing a visitor's appearance. A huge white rabbit with wiggling ears walked upright. Above the grey fog in the ancient palace, a figure was shrouded in greyish-white fog. He sat on the fool's seat at the end of the long molten table and silently observed the crimson star representing justice. Backland, Westboro, 9 Bellato Street. The closest window was to the end of the 2 weeks, the more he suffered from insomnia. He had relied on medication to fall asleep. When he woke up, he was restless, extremely anxious. He had lost all interest in food and only forced himself to eat the 3 meals sent by his colleagues to ensure his energy. He didn't know what would happen to the date of the trial, nor did he know if there would be an irreversible change to his body. The kind of fear towards the unknown often made him feel stiff, stifled, and was extremely torturous. Sometimes Wendell would either think about what might not be choice, resisting his return to Utopia. Based on his limited experience there, if he obediently returned to Utopia and testified in court, there was a high chance that he would leave safely. At least up until this point, Wendell didn't have anyone dying or going crazy because of Utopia. The people there were rather friendly, apart from being a little bizarre. "I'm going to help you. They should be grateful to me instead of being antagonistic." The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it would be more comfortable to face the danger. Of course, he had no doubts about MI9's protective capabilities. If it wasn't possible, he felt that he could only consider meeting the Lord of Storms early. Wendell exhaled and sat down on the chair. He casually picked up the novel and passed time. However, his frustrations made it impossible for him to immerse himself in the plot. He flipped through the pages more frequently, and finally he snapped to the book close. He closed the eyes and prepared to take a nap. In a daze, Wendell seemed to return to Utopia and arrived at the corner. However, his role wasn't as a witness, but a member of the audience. Tracy was deemed by the judge to have provided insufficient evidence to support a claim of self-defense and had been transferred to the criminal courts. He saw this lady tearing up in a daze, her smile extremely miserable. Wendell woke up and stared silently as the wall lamp in front of him. He sat there motionless for a long time. If the problem is Utopia and not the residents of Utopia, then me avoiding it might end up killing the poor lady. Wendell retracted his gaze. His resolve was wavered slightly, but he was still unable to overcome the fear in his heart. With his hand on the table, he stood up and walked to the door. He planned on wandering about MI9's headquarters to ease his mood. After leaving the room and taking a few steps forward, Wendell suddenly heard the colleague in office discuss the related cases of Utopia. "Have you heard? The person who entered Utopia was a carriage driver. He sent a merchant from Utopia to the dock area and was just talking about 2 turns to the crossing roads. He found himself somewhere unfamiliar. There's a need to warn all the carriage drivers in Backland. Yes, it's best to draw the parallel between Utopia and the spies so it can be understood. The way of entering the city Utopia is really frightening. Yes, sometimes I even suspect that the entrance to Utopia might appear anywhere. It's definitely a limit to this. It's not as omnipotent as we imagine, otherwise I might find myself in Utopia just by paying a visit to the washroom. According to the current patterns, we figured this is the theoretically valid. When Wendell heard that, his blood vessels on his forehead began to throb. He suddenly felt as though even if he was in the headquarters of MI9, he wouldn't be safe. Unless there's a demigod watching me the entire time, it's very difficult for me to avoid the fate of returning to Utopia. Perhaps after I wash my hands and open the washroom door, I'll discover that it's the Iris' hotel outside. No ordinary demigods might not be able to stop such a thing. This doesn't seem like it's something humans can accomplish. It's already extremely close to that of a deity. Wendell instantly panicked, unable to suppress the fear in his heart. He returned to the room and took out the subpoena from the Utopia court. Immediately following that, Wendell entered the washroom and held the document, and as he muttered in fear, "I'm willing to go to court to testify. I'm willing to go to court to testify." After repeating himself a few times, he reached out and grabbed the handle of the bathroom door. At that moment, the black raven flew through the ventilation hole in the ghost and landed in the corner of the washroom where no one would notice. In the next second, Wendell twisted the handle, pulled the black door, and opened the washroom door. It was no longer his familiar bedroom, but an unfamiliar lobby. really returned to utopia. Upon seeing this scene outside, Wendell felt... really quickly, I mentioned earlier, I was I feel like we're getting a lot of different POVs from random people. It's because Klein's actually fucking terrifying. It's because Klein's actually really scary right now. And I'm not saying, I'm not being oh, Klein's a villain, blah, blah, blah. I'm no, Klein's just arguably kind of a scary character. He's a god, or not a god, but he's an angel, and he's not really there, and he's in control of a lot of different people, and he's kind of manipulating everything behind the scenes. Klein's pretty scary right now. Wendell felt a baffling sense of, poor Wendell, to be honest. This guy is not doing well. Baffling sense of relief and ease. He no longer had any doubts about the choice he had to go testify in court. It had to be known that this was the washroom of MI9's. Wendell's just a little guy. He doesn't want to deal with any of this. He just wants to go on with his life. I know. Here's the thing. Klein would be such a good villain. It's like Audrey. Audrey would have had a really good villain arc. Klein would have an amazing villain arc because I feel like he has all of the characteristics that could make a really great villain, but he's just a good human being, and that that just doesn't line up. Yeah, that Monica lady is also just kind of, yeah, everyone's just a little scary right now. He no longer had any doubts about the choices to go testify in court. Yeah. Wasted villain potential. It had to be known that it was in the washroom of MI9's headquarters. It was a place that was impossible to invade even with a fully armed army. Wendell slowly exhaled as he walked out of the washroom and towards the entrance of the lobby. Behind him, the corner of the washrooms where no one was paying attention to, the pitch-black ravens had draped over the shadow-like veil, losing the physical presence even if one were to directly look at him. It would be difficult to discover it. Then its body became more and more transparent as it rapidly dissipated until it vanished. At this moment, Wendell had already walked a few meters out of the lobby when he saw a police officer in a black and white checkered uniform. This was a young officer who had requested to see him and testify. Biles. I knew you'd come because you're a kind person. Biles smiled at Wendell. When he heard the compliment, Wendell strung up his heart finally returned to normal. Then he instinctively turned his head back and saw that the bathroom that he had come out of had changed completely in style. It was no longer familiar to him. In the dream maze formed by the many minds, the huge white rabbit that walked upright squeezed through the open door and entered the vast wilderness with the grayish-white pillars magnifying places. Mr. Wraith. Although it wasn't wearing a persona mask, and unforgettable characteristics were enough for Audrey to recognize him at a glance. This was out of her expectations, but it wasn't too surprising. From her point of view, just Mr. Wraith alone likely wasn't enough to deal with the ancient mind dragon like Erehorg, even if Mr. Fool had warned her to be wary of Mr. Wraith. After all, the leader behind the Psychology Alchemists and former King of Angels had already become a sequencer true to God. According to the knowledge shared by the True Tarot Club, there shouldn't be any other authors. Beyond just in the real world, this is no matter how powerful Mr. Wraith was, as long as it was a part of the spectator pathway, would at most be the same level as Erehorg. The only thing is that it would differ from combat experience, psychology research, and self-cultivation. At this moment, with the giant white rabbit entered, the large, grayish-white, scowled Erehorg spread open his wings and covered his skin. Surrounding it was instantly covered in a shadow. The leap with the white rabbit's legs suddenly became extremely huge, like a tiny hill. At the same time, the gloomy sky above him lit up. The ground beneath his feet cracked open, spewing out crimson lava. Immediately after, blurry and distorted figures appeared behind it. The figure was dressed in a simple white robe. It was difficult to see his face clearly, but it was impossible to tell his age. One could only vaguely tell that this was a man. A bright halo hung to the back of his head, and a miniature sun beneath his feet was an illusory clock that was divided into 12 segments. Each segment represented a different symbol of time. Behind him, there was a shadow that looked like a curtain. Eyes seemed to be looking out from the shadow. Just after a figure appeared, the entire dream maze shook violently, and the gray fragments fell from the void. The contrast of depravity and pure sunlight rapidly spread around the huge white rabbit, eroding the assimilating and the area. However, the simple white-robed figure had trouble truly taking shape. He was unable to enter reality from history and illusions. Every time his silhouette became clear, his figure would distort like a machine, like it had signal disrupted. At that moment, Audrey instinctively retracted her gaze, not daring to look directly at the white, huge rabbit. Perhaps it was because in this dream was closely connected to the Mind Island, the Sea of Collective Subconscious. She didn't need anyone explaining to her. She knew that Mr. Wraith was doing. The other party knew that the latent psychology problems of Erhorg and knew that he feared the most. Then, according to this, it produced a nightmare that contained a specific image. In the battle between high sequence beyonders of the spectator pathway, if both parties were at the same level, it would be difficult to produce any true effects using the various means available to them. One could sneak onto the island of consciousness and attempt deep hypnosis. The other could guard the door of the body, mind, and heart, preventing foreigner consciousness from entering. The other could spread the mental plague to use the sea of collective subconsciousness to intrude on the enemy without them realizing it. The other would be able to placate themselves, treat the psychology ailments, and maintain their mental health. Therefore, the battle between same sequence spectators saints often had three fixed styles. First, set up a trap ahead of time and manipulate pronged attacks preparation. Then, by secretly leading on and guiding the opponents, one could break down their mental defenses in one strike and complete the hypnosis. Second, on focusing their physical defenses as a support, relying on powerful sealed artifacts to defeat their enemies. Third, when a beyonder powers such as mental plague, mind deprivation, dragon's breath, consciousness control, and other beyonder powers were unable to deal with their opponents, engaging in self-hypnotism and using dragon transformation would result in the intense melee battle that exchanged claw swipes and tail lashes. In the third battle, however, had a deeper understanding of the mind domain, and whose will was stronger and firmer, would be able to gain the upper hand by relying on the extended usage of dragon transformation. Of course, the prerequisite was that other parties had no chance of escaping, and at the level of an angel, everyone in the true mystical creature at the maintained time of the dragon transformation became meaningless. At this moment, it mainly depended on the observation. Whoever could find a flaw in the opponent's mind could weaver the corresponding nightmare, directly attacking the enemy's weakness, slowly destroying their mental defenses and reaching the effects of going mad or dying out of fear. As Audrey was the same dream, even if the nightmare wasn't directed at her, she was still affected by the corresponding emotions, characteristics, status, and even corruption. Now, she clearly knew that the nightmare that Mr. Wraith had weaved represented the ancient sun god. This was the most terrifying existence in Erhorg's mind. At the same time, the ancient sun god influence would uncontrollably corrupt the surroundings until it reached the entire dream. When the time came, once Audrey woke up, she would either become an untreatable mental ill patient, or she would become an incorporeal mythical creature, completely losing all reason and wildly attacking the surrounding creatures. Of course, there was another possibility that she unknowingly became depraved. She would become cold, cruel, bloodthirsty without realizing it, as if someone had replaced her. Option number three! Option number three! At that moment, Erhorg, who was squatting at the top of the grayish-white pillar, let out a powerful howl. As the dragon's roar echoed at the top, he turned his head, revealing a dark sea of secrets and colors that was difficult to describe with words. In the sea, even the bigger grayish-white dragon, spanning 1,000 meters long, rose up. One of his vertical pupils was pale gold, and the other was bright red color. There was a third eye in the dragon's forehead. It seemed to be hiding a thick shadow. Similarly, there was no need for anyone to explain. With the uniqueness of her present state, Audrey immediately knew that nightmares Erhorg had weaved. This was something that left a deep trauma in the giant white rabbit head. This was the Ankerwelt that had been corrupted by the underground world. This was the virtual persona, the mental corruption which had sealed off bronze doors. This was the thing that had been split off from the ancient god. At that moment, Audrey was in an indescribable nightmare. Although she had been corrupted, her mental state was in turmoil. She thought she had been odd. She immediately used placate on herself and didn't hesitate to rely on her own consciousness and forcefully escape the dream maze. During this process, she didn't encounter any obstructions, nor just because she wasn't Erhorg's and Mr. Wraith's target, but also because she would reach sequence 4 and possessed a certain amount of godhood. Therefore, she quickly woke up from her dream. Audrey suddenly opened her eyes and saw crystal chandeliered. I read the word crystal and I just got so scared. Dyed with faint crimson, she saw the deep darkness of the room. Without any delay, she got out of bed and ran to the window to look outside. The entire manor was completely silent, as if deep asleep everything was normal. Audrey frowned, immediately spit out a virtual persona, allowing her to enter the mind... allowing her to enter the Mind Island at night patroller. She remembered very clearly that the dream maze was formed by many minds. Once the two nightmares spread in the result of the unimaginable, therefore before this she had woken up everybody in the manor. The next second, the patrolling guard suddenly raised his hand and removed the grenade hanging from his belt. He pulled out a pin and threw it towards the empty garden. The loud explosion jolted the sleeping people. Immediately after, the guard shouted loudly, "Enemy assault! Enemy assault!" Earl Hall and his wife were already over 50 years old, so as light sleepers, they jolted awake immediately. Regardless of how good Hibbert's sleep quality was, he woke up with the reverie thanks to such loud explosions. Alfred had opened his eyes the moment the grenade was thrown. The remaining butler, maids, footmen, and bodyguards woke up one after another. They looked confused and dumbfounded, not knowing what had just happened. And at the far end of the manor's main building, a few servants heard the commotion and didn't wake up in time. A few seconds later, they struggled out of bed in pain, like snakes shedding skin. They broke free from their skin, turning into hideous bodies of blood. They didn't wake up until they died. Oh my god, dude! Just the civilian casualties that happen in this book is crazy. Just the poor people that do nothing wrong. They're just working class people that are just trying to make a living. And they just, become the biggest demographic of casualties. Because Beyonders are fucking around. At that moment, Audrey saw the grayish-white dragon spread his wings to the sea of collective subconsciousness as rapidly departed. A huge white rabbit followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, the dragon's voice sounded in an illusory sea. Adam isn't necessarily Adam, just like how I might not necessarily be. Pause. Am I missing a page? At that moment, Audrey saw the grayish-white dragon spread its wings to the sea of collective subconsciousness as it rapidly departed. A huge white rabbit followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, the dragon's voice resounded in the illusory sea. Adam isn't necessarily Adam, just like how I might not necessarily be Arihog. The giant white rabbit suddenly slowed down and gradually stopped. All the abnormalities came to an end as the entire area returned to normal. So apparently everyone's working together. Apparently everybody's just teaming off and working together. In the ancient palace above the Grey Fog, Adam didn't attack. The fool Klein frowned slightly as he turned to attention back to Utopia and replaced the instruction Klein! Adam didn't attack. The fool Klein frowned slightly as he turned his attention back to Utopia and replaced the instinctual monitoring of the worms of spirit. He clearly inspected the marionette town and didn't find anything abnormal. Honestly, been a minute since I've seen that guy. Long time no see. Seeing that there weren't any abnormalities in the town of marionettes, Klein began thinking of Miss Justice's encounter. It wasn't Adam who set up the attack against Arihog, but Hermes who masterminded it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible for Adam to not descend. It would also be impossible for Arihog to escape so easily. He had to rely on the second city of miracles to have some hope of doing so. If Hermes was the mastermind, the development of this whole episode becomes logical. Hermes never thought of capturing or killing Arihog. He only hoped of learning some information from the ancient mind dragon. When Arihog said Adam isn't necessarily Adam, the operation came to a natural end. Yes, from the looks of it, Hermes already had some doubts about Adam's true state. However, due to the limitations of his status, he had been able to make Arihog appear on his own accord, so he used Miss Justice. Adam isn't necessarily Adam. Arihog isn't necessarily Arihog. The sentence is very interesting. The upper echelons of the spectator pathway are more mysterious than Seer. Back then, Dragon of Imagination Anklewell clearly occupied Sequence 0, but he had a Sequence 1 son of the same pathway as him, Dragon of Nightmare Al-Zuhud. If Adam isn't really Adam, then who is he? Is it the Adam from the myth in the... I don't want to say who I think Adam is. I don't want to say. The resurrection that Ancient Sun got from the looks of it, the meaning behind the Medici. It says, he could be the resurrection of the Ancient Sun God, which I think he might be. But, I feel like that's such a cop-out answer. That's such a basic answer to do it. From the looks of it, the meaning behind why Medici dresses him as a zealot is far more profound meaning. Klein quickly conjured a gold coin and flicked it into the air, making a divination. Bro, everybody's Klein. Everybody's Klein. I was right when I was like, oh, everybody's Klein. I might not have had the particulars down, but I had the basis correct. Everybody did eventually end up being Klein. Whatever. Fucking. I think it'd be cool if Adam, like, he could be the ancient sun god, but I also think it would be cool if Adam was like the celestial worthy or something, or like the Lord of Mysteries or something like that. I don't know. I think that would be cool. That'd be like a cool thing for Adam to be. But he can be the ancient sun god or whatever. This end is very interesting. The upper echelons of spectator path are more mysterious than the seers. Back then, dragon of imagination, we are all Adam. Anglewelt clearly occupied the sequence 0, but he had a sequence 1 sun. If Adam really is an Adam, then who is he? The being a zealot, more profound meaning. Klein quickly conjured the gold coins and flicked it into the air, making a divination. As a result, the divination indicated today's development was nothing dangerous. Klein immediately dispersed the gold coin and prepared... No, but I feel like a lot of shit's gonna go down with Adam, because, like, he hasn't really done anything yet. I don't know. I said in my thing where I was like, I want a reason to, like, actually be scared of him. And, like, think that he's a really cool character. Because everybody always hypes him up. But... I don't know. He's just really strong. And, like, I know he did that whole thing of, like, starting a war and advancing and stuff, but I think it'd be cool if he was something. He's not that cool of a character yet. That's all I'm gonna say. And this might be, I might be eating my words here, but he's not. At this moment, his actions became slightly sluggish. The moment Miss Justice met Arahog, the Hermes was almost simultaneously at the moment that MI9 personnel returned to Utopia and testified in court. Just looking at them individually, there was no problem, but the world simultaneously made Klein somewhat alert. He was very sensitive to words like happened to, coincidence, simultaneously, and almost the same time. This was mark left behind from his past experiences. That's called PTSD, Klein. That's called you need therapy, Klein. That's called you have mental health issues now, Klein. He trapped his finger on the edge of the long molten table to descend to make preparations for his worries. That's just his tick. Him tapping his finger is just a tick that he uses to calm his brain. He quickly condenses the light in certain words that someone will and threw it into the light of prayer. After doing this, Klein made his consciousness sink into the left Sephra castle, allowing his mind to return to his original body. No, dude, I hate to say it, Klein's a lost cause. Klein might have been able to salvage what little mental state he had left 2 volumes ago. Ever since Amon kidnapped him and took him to the land of the Forsaken Gods, that one time, that one time Amon kidnapped him, he's been a lost cause. We were all just like, you know what, Klein? You had a good run, buddy. You might as well see it through, my guy. You don't got much left. This way, even if anything happens, it would affect the innocent. This also meant that Klein was prepared to abandon Utopia and change locations and rebuild his marionettes. He's gonna abandon it? He worked so hard, though. After all, the ritual could be repeated many times, but he could only afford one resurrection. Here's the thing. Miss Justice's therapy sessions after Klein was kidnapped by Amon and, like, had to deal with that and everything going forward, that was literally just the equivalent of someone who's dying, and then the people around him are like, oh my god, I'm so scared, and then the person who's dying is like, it's okay. I'm fine. Like, everything's gonna be fine. We're so fine knowing that they're bleeding out. Like, that was kind of the equivalent of it. I feel like Klein's known he's been a lost cause for a while now, and he's just, pushing through. Rubbing alcohol on the gunshot wound. Literally. Have a good rest for the next 2 days. There's still some time left, but wait. After town, after all, the ritual could repeat many times, but he could only afford one resurrection. Have a good rest for the next 2 days. There's still some time left before the court begins. Biles sent Wendell to the entrance of the Iris' hotel. Wendell replied with a smile. I'm already feeling sleepy. It was in the middle of the night when he was trouble sleeping previously because of his anxiety and nervousness. This was why he thought of walking around the headquarters of MI9 to ease the mood. However, when he heard the conversation between his colleagues at night, it triggered an eruption in his emotions, and he decided to return to Utopia and face the problems. After checking in, Wendell took the luggage and went to the 3rd floor. When he passed through the door, he vaguely felt that his surroundings were abnormally dark. In order to sleep better, Wendell walked to the window and drew the curtains. During this process, he felt the scenery outside the window was unusually familiar. However, under the cover of the night, he could tell that what was happening was too clearly, thinking that it might have been the same scene might have been the scene he had seen in Utopia previously. He covered his mouth with his hand and yawned. He took off his clothes and walked towards the bed. Monica slept until midnight when she suddenly needed to pee. Unable to hold it any longer, she eventually got out of the bed and walked towards her room's attached bathroom. When she pushed the bathroom door open, she found it a little heavier. Rubbing her eyes, they was almost unable to open. Monica didn't care about the small change. She quickly revealed herself and ran to the bathroom to her bed. Relieved herself and ran out of the bathroom to her bed. When she entered the covers, she felt the temperature was much lower and she had no choice but to wrap herself up tightly in layers. She didn't take long to fall asleep again. About 15 minutes later, the patrolling Biles rubbed his hands and turned towards the street where the police station was. He was about to hand over the duties with his colleague. Suddenly, his body froze in the alley. The black and dense spirit body threads in his body peeled off at the same time they floated upwards. A prune with an exquisite paper figurine landed on the connecting to the spirit body threads, quickly turning into another Biles. At the same time, the torrent of mixed knowledge surged over and resembled him into a man wearing a gorgeous clothes and long chestnut hair. The man had blue eyes, a high nose bridge, and thin lips. It was Roselle Gustav's Sequence 1 historical void projection. Roselle, what are you doing here? Right on the heels of that, the projection reached out and sucked all the information surrounding into its palm, forming an illusory ball of light. This information including all the deities that involved Biles. In the next second, Roselle Gustav's historical projection forged a piece of information that was completely normal, completely normal. All of this is completely normal. Allowing it to follow the spirit body threads connecting to the paper figurine of the St. Ariana Cathedral in the municipal square, moving straight underground to the cathedral. After a series of actions, another torrent of information surged in midair. With Roselle's help, they were formed into 3 figures. A middle-aged man wearing a black robe and a hood with a long, thick white beard, another who was draped in cloak, black hair, blue eyes, and rather squarish face. He was a middle-aged man with a dignifying bearing. On one of the 3, there was a huge tree that seemed to be drenched in petroleum. On the other, there was an arm with sorts of strange protruding objects that rolled to the bloodshot eyes. They were the leader of the secret order, Zuratil, Lowen's protector, the first king, William Augustus I, his historical projection. A historical projection of Abomination Sua. This fucking guy! Oh my god. The day this bum dies. Fake or phony? After making the necessary preparation, Zuratil used the location provided by the historical projection. What a fucking group of losers. It literally is just a group of rejects. Zuratil, King William Augustus, and Abomination Sua. Like, Zuratil, do we not have any other friends, my guy? Can we not think of anybody else? We had, like... I'm not talking about Roselle, I'm talking about those 3. I'm literally like, bro. Can we not make any other friendships other than Abomination Sua? Fake or phony bum of all time. And then William Augustus I. The man just sounds like a colonizer. He didn't waste any time. He reached out of his right hand and used the law of convergence of bionic characteristics to suck out the worms of spirit and Biles. Elsewhere, in the palm of Abomination's historical projection, made an ugly doll size of the palm appear. The doll went wet and sticky and had no eyes, ears, or nose. It only had a pinhole-like mouth that emanated the sucked grayish-white fog. As the worm of spirit and the doll approached, the black and white eyeballs that rolled out on the Sua tree trunk looked at them at the same time. Silently, the worm spirit fused with the ugly doll, causing it to distort into a squirmish, growing out. I need to find a photo whenever. Okay, so here's the thing. Because in my mind, I always think of the Abomination from, I'm pretty sure it's DC Comics. And I think, hold up. So when I think of Zeratul, King William Augustus, and then Abomination Sua, I think of the Abomination from DC Comics. I think of the Wizard from Shrek 3. And then I think of, Christopher Columbus. And I don't know why those people that come in my mind when I think of and I just need to get that out there and have you guys understand that when I read these three together, that is who I am picturing. Is the Wizard from Shrek 3, Christopher Columbus, and the Abomination from DC Comics. And it's so funny every single time. That's why I'm like, it's such a ragtag bunch. And I know that's not what they look like in the books, but that's how I picture them in my head. Anyway, we can continue. Elsewhere, the palm of Abomination's historical projection made an ugly doll the size of a palm appear. The doll was wet and sticky, had no eyes, ears, or nose. Can someone please make a photo of that? Just the three of them? Because I just need to see it. The doll was wet, emanating stuck grayish-white fog. As the worms of spirit and the doll approached, the black and white eyeballs that rolled out of the Sua tree trunk looked at them at the same time. Silently, the worms of spirit fused with the ugly doll, causing it to distort and to squirm the growing out eyes, ears, nose, making it look like Klein Moretti. At this point, Zeratul no longer had any concealment, nor could he do so. He took out the black shroud and abruptly wrapped Klein's doll up. All the marionette spirit body threads in Utopia were severed at the same time. They were unable to connect to the true body. This was because there was something wrong with them, but the true body was isolated from them. All of a sudden, the duty personnel in the police station, tenants in the hotel, Tracy and the thieves of the cell, Anderson, in an apartment, Azul and the other citizens all stopped breathing and turned stiff. Regardless of whether they were sleeping or doing something else, it was as if they paused button on the press. Klein, who was at the bottom of St. Ariana Cathedral, suddenly woke up. He knew that an accident had happened. He didn't hesitate. With the thought, he returned to Sephra Castle. With the level of strength of the King of Angels, he was able to resist enemies and show that he had yet to show themselves. This was the best choice in the current situation. Even if he was able to protect the true body, Klein still had a chance to survive. At that moment, the flow consciously touched his invisible dark barrier, making it difficult to prevent and enter Sephra Castle. This, Klein's heart tightened. He believed that the enemy might be some troublesome he imagined. Few higher-level existences knew that they could return to Sephra Castle was a thought. In the next few seconds, a thick petroleum-slathered tree had arrived at St. Ariana Cathedral. In addition, a deep and dignified voice resounded. Wandering is prohibited here. Teleportation is prohibited here. Klein wasn't led by his emotions. Seeing that he couldn't return to Sephra Castle at the moment, he immediately changed his strategy and leapt towards the fog of history. The moment the grayish-white fog entered his eyes, it turned into a whirlpool formed by countless transparent maggots. The vortex entered out slippery tentacles covered with a strange pattern. Unlike previous, the vortex emanated the powerful suction force, causing Klein's figure to speed up and entangle by countless tentacles. Law of Beyonic Characteristics Convergence. The law of Beyonic Characteristic Convergence between angels. The subtle beam of light flashes Klein, who was firmly controlled by Zeratul mythical creature form, turned into a paper figurine. This was the angel level duplication of paper figurine substitute, as well as the help of grafting. Though Klein can return to Supper Castle, he could influence the worms of spirit above the Grey Fog, allowing them to use the current to provide help. After dodging Zertil's fatal blow, Klein rang into the fog of history and fled towards the former metropolis from the time before the First Epoch. At this moment, many marionettes who had been dead for a long time in Utopia rapidly decayed from losing their spirit body threads maintaining them. Their limbs dropped to the ground or mutated because of their bionic characteristics. The latter transformed into different monsters, ones from far more terrifying than imaginable. Some swallowed their heads, others were left with only squirming flesh, while others grew dense eyes. Soon, Klein ran to the old metropolis, suited inside the fog of history. To him, this was a safe room that could be trusted. This was because the only scholar Bjor who was human from before the history could enter. Without any hesitation, Klein habitually surveyed the area and began praying to the Evernight goddess in the Sack City. The faint sound rang out as the ancient wood stake with traces of blood penetrated Klein's heart from behind. The figure phased into existence behind him, and it was a cold-looking man wearing a half-top hat and black trench coat. "Gehrman Sparrow!" Klein's pupils dilated as the crazy adventurer said in a deep voice, "Adam has given me humanity." He's his own person now? Pause. Stop. Everybody quiet on set. Adam! Crazy! Oh my god. Okay. New developments in the story. The bad news, Klein might not be having the smoothest of sailings in the next little bit. On the good news, Gehrman Sparrow's a free man now. Klein turned around and looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar figure. He had imagined all kinds of attacks on Utopia, but he had never expected such a scene to occur. If Amon had parasitized the marionette, Gehrman Sparrow, then, with Klein's current status and the spirit worms of Supper Castle, he definitely would have immediately discovered the problem. And if Zerto were to swap the spirit body threads, he could only temporarily hide it from him. Furthermore, he needed help from an angel like an unknown emperor or a servant of the concealment to ensure the element of surprise in the sudden attack. Only the humanity provided by the spectator could slowly ferment without revealing any abnormalities on the surface. To prevent such a situation, he could only sever the spirit body threads and allow the marionette to deteriorate until it died. That way, regardless of whether it had any humanity in it or not, it would ultimately cease to exist. No! Unfortunately, Klein had never heard of such methods before. All he did was guard against the invasion of a virtual persona on his marionettes. This might be the power of a visionary, giving life to everything virtual and immaterial, the unique sense of humanity. The carved and cold face was reflected in Klein's eyes as he felt a force pushing him away. He immediately fell backwards, falling from the layers of ruins of the old metropolis out from the fog of history. During the process, he wanted to control himself, but there was nothing he could do. This was because the wooden stake at the heart had sealed all the Beyonder powers. With a thought, Klein looked at Gehrman Sparrow and snapped his fingers. The worms of spirit in Supper Castle received his will and gave up the marionette spirit body threads. They also picked up the Staff of the Stars and prepared to give Klein a fatal blow so as to commit suicide. After his main body completely died, Klein would be able to revive above the Grey Fog and escape his predicament. He no longer held any hope after finding out that Amon was the mastermind behind the scenes. So little bit. I said Amon. I meant Adam. I read Adam. I said Amon. A little bit regretting what I said about Adam earlier. He's kind of scary. He does scheme. He does do things And, I think I'm good. He granted my wish. Garamond Sparrow is a free man. He's roaming around. But I think I'm good. Yeah. At this moment, a stone square floating in the void appeared beneath Klein's feet. The black stone pillar rose up and propped up the grand and holy cathedral, enveloping Klein inside. The Corpse Cathedral, Adam's Corpse Cathedral, the divine kingdom of a visionary. The countless bolts of silver lightning smote down from Sephra Castle, penetrating the fog of history, and struck the cathedral, but failed to shake it at all. At the same time, in an ancient palace, the figure sitting in the fool's seat suddenly collapsed to the side, forming a vortex formed around transparent maggots. The vortex extended out slippery and strange tentacles, crazily smacking the surroundings, overturning the junk pile, and destroying the long, molten table. Klein's avatar had lost contact with his true body, and because of his true body hadn't really died, they had lost control and went crazy, just like Zeratil from before. In the old metropolis, before the first epoch, Garamond Sparrow, who was wearing a half-top hat and black trench coat, looked up at Sephra Castle, his expression mixed. He was basically a corpse. After his spirit body threads were abandoned, he naturally couldn't maintain his existence. The only thing Adam gave him was humanity. There was no envisioned life for him. I will give him life. As that would result in the discovery of there being something wrong with Garamond Sparrow. Garamond Sparrow slowly collapsed as he looked at the room of the old metropolis. He died in this ruin. Did they actually just kill Garamond Sparrow? Did they actually just kill Garamond Sparrow? Or is it like he's gone? Is he gone or is he gone? Oh my god, no! Oh my god, no! Klein's feet landed on the ground and stood in the middle of the cathedral. He saw that every arch, the stone pillar, was embedded with the skulls of different races. This is such an emotional roller coaster. Oh my god. Oh my god, poor Klein. Did I not call that the person who's gonna die this volume is gonna be Klein, but it's gonna be a piece of Klein? I just didn't expect that piece to be Garamond Sparrow. Packed densely together, staring at the intruder with the hollow eyes. On the walls, windows, and doors of the cathedral, transparent disorder and painful faces appeared, separating the interior from the outside world. And in front of the cathedral stood a cross that was more than 100 meters tall. In front of the cross, there were rows of black pews. Adam, who was wearing a simple white robe, had a pale gold bead, and standing on the cross was a silver cross hanging from his neck. He faced the pews and the priest who was preparing to deliver a sermon. His expression was warm, and his eyes were limpid, as though he was only inviting Klein to listen to the scriptures. Klein lowered his head and looked at the cross-shaped wooden stake that was stuck on his chest. He slowly walked to the first pew and sat in the middle. For a true mythical creature formed from many worms of spirit, the wounds on its chest wasn't fatal. The main purpose of an ancient body cross stake was to seal its powers. If not for the true god standing in front of him, Klein could have used his physical strength to pull out the wooden stake and remove the seal. At this moment, he didn't make any attempts because he was afraid that he would turn his thought of not daring to not willing to. I didn't expect you to directly interfere in this matter. If you wanted to deal with me, you didn't have to wait until today. Klein looked at his bloody-stained shirt and seriously voiced his doubts. He wasn't afraid at all. It was as if he had certain that Adam wouldn't kill him. Adam held the silver cross pendant with one hand and calmly said, "Before now, you were able to be of quite some use in many ways." He took 2 steps forward and continued with limpid eyes. "When Amon came to steal the corpse cathedral, I made a deal with him. By helping me... I knew these bitches were working together! I called this shit! I made a deal with him. By helping me obtain the first blasphemy slate, I'll help him capture you." Is that so? Klein was instantly enlightened. On the other hand, Adam didn't wish to be obstructed by existences like the true creator when he became the god, and on the other hand, he wanted to obtain the first blasphemy slate. Therefore, he used the unshuttered crucifix and other methods to give Klein an impetus to head for the giant king's court, opened the door to the chamber of the assassin who was sleeping to attract the attention of the true creator and other existences. On the other hand, he used his brother Amon to steal the first blasphemy state at a critical moment. And to capture Klein, who was about to obtain preliminary control of Sephra Castle, it would definitely be most appropriate to say I have a visionary arrange the developments for him. Although Amon and Adam usually appear distant, they are still brothers and can work together more easily. Klein nodded silently and looked at the stained glass that had distorted faces. I also didn't expect Zeratil to cooperate with you. Isn't he afraid of becoming food for Amon? When Klein established Utopia and he considered Amon's attack and Zeratil's deduction, however, he never expected that they would work together in a certain way. From this point of view, the chances of Zeratil completely siding with the Mother True Desire were higher than this, unless Adam had unknowingly arranged such a development for him. Adam's limpid eyes slowly sympathized. To him, you become a great old one means that he will definitely perish. However, if Amon becomes one, as long as he's expressed his loyalty, he can still retain his present level and status. A Lord of Mysteries still requires an attendant of mysteries. Therefore, he chose to cooperate with me. During this process, if he can seize the opportunity and turn you into a marionette before I do, using to enter Sephra Castle and become the owner of Sephra, then he has a right to demand the opportunity to face Antigonus and Evernight place, and have an ultimate showdown with Amon. On the contrary, he will completely admit defeat and pledge allegiance to Amon. On this point, he was very decisive. It doesn't seem like your style to explain so much, Klein rapidly replied casually before frowning. You don't need all the Sequence 1 Beyond characteristics of the corresponding pathway to become a great old one. He had deduced that the form of the relationship between the ancient sun god and the 8 kings of angels. However, he believed that one had to first become a great old one, or a quasi-one, before dividing the characteristics. Adam replied gently. For neighboring pathways, all that is needed is the uniqueness of the Sequence 1 Beyond characteristic. It's easy to lose control if one forcefully occupies more. Therefore, if Zeratil pledges allegiance to Amon, he still has a chance to become a king of angels, and he isn't able to pledge allegiance to you because he can't separate the Sequence 2 avatar like those from the Marauder pathway. And then stealing his main body, spirit body consciousness, and psyche, overturning the avatar into a main body. This was the qualitative difference between Seer Marionette and Marauder's Worm of Time. The former involves spirit body threads, while the latter relies on themselves. Furthermore, the reason that Marauder angels could do this was because their Sequence 2 was a Trojan horse of destiny. Just as Klein nodded, he suddenly saw Adam turn his body, revealing something beneath the cross. It was a gray stone slab. There weren't many molten marks left on the surface, making it look rather ancient. This was very similar to the first blasphemy slate, but it didn't have any abnormality, ancient feeling to it. It also had the words that looked like the sound of all language. They were written on the names of the sequence and potion formulas. The second blasphemy slate, Klein asked in surprise. His gaze quickly swept across the stone slab. He didn't read the first few paragraphs, but instead looked at the last few lines. The intuition told him that there was a very important piece of information down there. There's no need to rush. Amon has completed the ritual and become a Sequence 0 before stealing your fate. Oh my god, yay! Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to withstand the identity of Sephra Castle's owner. And before that, it's best to let you continue staying in my kingdom. Adam acted as though he was consoling a repentant. Kill me, Klein muttered inwardly. At this moment, he figured out the last few lines. God Almighty, Creator, Maker, the Omnipotent and Omniscient, Lord of the astral world. Sea of Chaos, Visionary Uniqueness, the Sun Uniqueness, Tyrant Uniqueness, White Tower Uniqueness, the Hangman Uniqueness, one Author beyond a characteristic, one White Angel beyond a characteristic, one Thunder God beyond a characteristic, one Omniscient Eye beyond a characteristic, one Dark Angel beyond a characteristic, the Lord of Mysteries, King of Spacetime, Beacon of Destiny, embodiment of Sephra Castle, Dominator of the Spirit World, Sephra Castle, the Fool Uniqueness, Emperor Uniqueness, Door Uniqueness, one Attendant of Mysteries beyond a characteristic, one Worm of Time beyond a characteristic, one Key of Stars beyond a characteristic. Upon seeing this, Klein turned his head to look at Adam and asked in puzzlement, "Why are you showing me these? Wouldn't it be safer to hypnotize me and put me to sleep until Amon becomes a god?" Adam's eyes were clear as he said with a warm expression, "To be frank, if the other party wasn't Amon, then I'd be more willing to help you become the dominator of the spirit world. We have too many things in common. In a sense, we are old friends who have met before." With that said, he smiled and said, "We meet again, Mysteries." Mysteries. The last time Klein heard that title was from the consciousness of the true creator who had descended. The penultimate instance was from the ancient sun god from history, the city of Silver Creator. In a sense, the two of them were equal. The true creator was equivalent to the ancient sun god, evil spirit, after retrieving Sastri's personality. However, unlike before, Klein wasn't flustered when he heard this man addressing him. Neither his heart nor his teeth chattered. At that moment, he felt as though he had finally seen a suspended rock fall to the ground. Of course, he wasn't that calm either. To a certain extent, surprise, shock, and disbelief were inevitable. It was because the words "Adam isn't necessarily Adam" from Erahorg that he had already come up with many speculations and was mentally prepared. We meet again, Mysteries. Adam is equivalent to the ancient sun god, or is this the resurrection contingency of the ancient sun god? He knows this, but he still wishes to revive his father, so that's why Medici calls him a zealot. Thoughts flashed through Klein's mind as he gained a brand new understanding of certain matters. It's no wonder Adam never promoted teaching about himself. He only spread what was left of the ancient sun god. Klein originally believed that this was due to the special trait of visionary and how he could use his uniqueness to create a bunch of realistic believers as anchors. This way he didn't need to build a congregation. But from the looks of it, this was probably only one of the reasons. After 2 seconds of silence, he looked into Adam's pure eyes and said, "You're the ancient sun god." Adam maintained his warm smile and said in an illuminating tone, "Don't you think I'm the most unique among the 8 kings of angels? After reading the contents of the second blasphemy slate regarding the great old ones, you should be able to clearly understand this point." Indeed, Klein nodded, indicating that he could tell. "Of the 5 kings of angels related to the omnipotent omniscient, you are the only one with the uniqueness." According to the mysticism knowledge that Klein currently possessed, when the City of Silver's creator was still alive, the 8 kings of angels were in the same state. Dark Angel Sastri digested 2 Sequence 1 characteristics of the Hangman pathway and controlled the first blasphemy slate, allowing him to use the portion of the powers of the Chaos Seed. Therefore, he was Heaven's deputy, the left hand of God, the king among kings of angels. When White Angel Accusus contained 2 Sequence 1 characteristics of the Sun pathway, Wind Angel Leodero, Angel of Wisdom Herabergen, Angel of Fate Ouroboros also possessed possessed two sequence 1 bionic characteristics of their respective pathways. Angel of Time Amon, Red Angel Medici were the ones with a uniqueness of their own pathway in a corresponding sequence 1 bionic characteristic. Angel of Imagination Adam had the spectator pathway's uniqueness and two sequence 1 bionic characteristics. This didn't seem problematic at first glance, but it appeared strange on careful thought. Angel of Time Amon and Red Angel Medici didn't belong to the 5 pathways of omnipotence and omniscience, and there was no problem about the ancient sun god using different methods to give them their uniqueness. However, Adam was different. Visionary belonged to one of the 5 pathways of omnipotence and omniscience, and the corresponding uniqueness was one of the foundations needed by the ancient sun god to become a great old one. In other words, this was equivalent to one of the 3 sequence 1 bionic characteristics needed of a sequence 0. How could it be randomly separated? After all, Sasri, as the deputy of heaven, the left hand of God, didn't obtain the uniqueness of the hangman pathway, much less Wind Angel Leodero. Angel of Wisdom Haraburger and White Angel Acusis. Klein originally believed that the ancient sun god had sensed the awakening of the primordial one, so he had deliberately used the method of having children to separate one of the 5 uniquenesses from himself, taking the initiative to lower his level of resist the corruption and invasion. This was probably the thoughts of other deities and kings of angels back then. When he heard Erahorg say Adam isn't necessarily Adam, Klein felt that there might be a deeper secret hidden in the matter and came up with some guesses. After witnessing the last few lines of the second blasphemy slate, he found it even stranger. This was because the uniqueness was one of the foundations of becoming a great old one. If the Sephra was the foundation, then the corresponding uniqueness were weight-bearing columns. It would be deeply problematic no matter which one was lost. If the ancient sun god wanted to lower his level and better choose would be separate the sequence 1 bionic characteristics, that would be relatively safer. Dressed in a simple white robe and wearing thick golden beard, Adam walked to Klein's side and turned around. He looked at the blasphemy slate and said, "A visionary has something very special. Normally, sequence 0s are made up of uniqueness that 3 sequence 1 bionic characteristics. Missing one of them prevents them from being considered a true deity. They can only be considered a king of angels after becoming a sequence 0. A visionary is able to split 2 sequence 1 bionic characteristics and replace the corresponding characteristics via envisioning. The object produced by envisioning is real enough. It can work perfectly under the framework of the uniqueness and the sequence 1 bionic characteristic, allowing the visionary's level and strength to not decrease. The 2 real separated sequence 1 bionic characteristics can be combined with one other deity or a certain life form that was envisioned. It can make them become an author with complete freedom. When necessary, one can use a certain method or some mediums to transform him into a true form. And the omniscient and omniscient, he can create a uniqueness that borders between reality and illusory to maintain his state. As long as he doesn't exceed the necessary limitations. This is the relationship between Dragon and Imagination Angewelt and his child Dragon Nightmare Alzuhud. I once thought that the Seer Marauder pathways were the most bizarre. From the looks of it, they can't compare to Spectator. Be careful of the Spectator. Klein completely resolved the question on his mind. He also understood why the Dragon of Imagination Angewelt had arranged for 0-08 to meet Grozel's travels. Once they met, the quill, which originated from the Dragon of Nightmare Alzuhud, would awaken and become the Dragon of Imagination Angewelt at a lower level. Then, this resurrected ancient god would use the negative persona sealed behind the bronze door to activate the Chaos Sea's power, instantly reaching the level of a stronger king of angels bestowed that of a true deities. With such a foundation, he had the chance to compete with Adam for the position of visionary and completely revive. It's simpler, neater, and cleaner compared to the Black Emperor Resurrection. Klein nodded slightly and said, "The relationship between Dragon of Imagination and the Dragon of Nightmare?" Adam sat down beside Klein. "Yes. However, the Dragon of Imagination has been corrupted, and he had characteristics of other pathways, putting him in a poor condition. All he could do was separate an author. Otherwise, he would have directly lost control." Klein ignored Adam beside him and looked at the second blasphemy slate in front of him. What's the difference between this, the Marauder's avatar? If Amon can become Error, he too can create at least 2 sequence 1 avatars. Adam leaned forward and simply explained, "The avatar and the main body are still the same, but they are located in different areas." Does this mean that sequence 1 that's envisioned is completely separated from the real body and can be considered another person? Only by using some method or using some medium can one awaken. Klein asked thoughtfully. You awakened when you became a visionary. No, Adam looked straight ahead and replied with a gentle expression. When I perished, the true was born. Klein asked surprised. Was no one suspicious? The deities knew that the ancient sun god had long been resurrected in Adam. The history of the fourth epoch would most likely be besieged the Solomon Empire, the Twilight Hermit Order, and the Amon family. Apart from True knowing about this, perhaps only Evernight and her suspicious, Adam said, his voice neither fast nor slow. I disguised myself as a zealot waiting my father to awaken into my body. It's not difficult for a king of angels from the visionary pathway to do so. Then, Medici, Klein suddenly felt a pity for the Red Angel. Thinking up to this point, he lowered his head and looked at the blood-stained wooden stake on his chest. He felt that he had deserved more sympathy. Adam said calmly, It was a necessary sacrifice. Why do you think he can remain alive for so many years after becoming an evil spirit without discovered? Klein fell silent for 2 seconds before asking, Are you going to let me wait just like this? You can also choose to leave this corpse cathedral, but Zert will be waiting for you at this entrance. In your present state, you can only become his marionette, Adam said without any emotion. Oh my god. Klein fell silent as he read the remaining contents on the second blasphemy slate. In the fog sea, oh my god. Bernadette, love you girl. Don't actually care right now. Kind of in the middle of something. In the fog sea, the dawn silently sailed through the undulating blue waves. Bernadette slightly opened her eyes and sat up. She frowned and picked up an item on the table. The item was completely gold in color, and there were mysterious symbols engraved on the surface, making it look like a miniature water flask. The sealed artifact. The magic wishing lamp. Bernadette held the wishing lamp and bowed her head and chanted an honorific name. Yes! The fool that doesn't belong to this era, the mysterious ruler above the great bog, the king of yellow and black who wields good luck. Bernadette, saving the day. Saving the day once again. Saving the day. See, Klein's always got something. He's good. He's fine. He's got it. You guys like that? More where that came from. It's on the SoundCloud. I've got a whole career. New album, new EP dropping. Above the great fog in the ancient palace, beside the fool's seat, a prayer point of light expanded and produced rippling halos. It was as though someone had suddenly drawn the curtains in a dark, sealed room, allowing sunlight to shine in, piercing into the eyes of the sleeping one. The whirlpool of maggots, which had already appeared, quieted down once again, went berserk as if beginning to flail the slippery and strange tentacles. Klein's gaze swept past the parts that were related to the Lord of Mysteries, and he read the subsequent content on the slate. Eternal darkness, singularity of all, space, time in one. River of eternal darkness plus Evernight uniqueness plus death, in brackets, eternal sleepless uniqueness, plus Twilight Giant uniqueness, plus one Knight of Misfortune beyond a characteristic, plus one Pale Emperor beyond a characteristic, plus one Hand of God beyond a characteristic. Goddess of Origins, Mother of All, Brood Hive of Filth. Brood Hive, plus Mother uniqueness, plus the Moon uniqueness, plus one Nature Walker beyond a characteristic, plus one Beauty Goddess beyond a characteristic. The Anarchy Shadow of Order. Nation of Disorder, Black Emperor uniqueness, just to cure. Oh my god, why can't I read this? One Prince of Abolition beyond a characteristic, one Hand of Order beyond a characteristic, Calamity of Destructions, Origins of Disaster, City of Calamity, Demoness, in parentheses, Chaos Demoness, Primordial Demoness, out of parentheses, uniqueness, Red Priest uniqueness, one Apocalypse beyond her characteristic, one Conqueror beyond her characteristics. Father of Devils, Lord of Deviants, Source of Curses. Tenebrous World, Abyss uniqueness, Chained uniqueness, one Filthy Monarch, one Abomination beyond a characteristic. Demon of Knowledge, Arcana of Madness. Knowledge more, the Hermit uniqueness, Paragon uniqueness, 1 Knowledge Emperor beyond a characteristic, 1 Illuminator beyond a characteristic, Key of Light, Endless Disorder, Incarnation of Fate. Key of Light, Wheel of Fortune uniqueness, 1 Giant Serpent beyond a characteristic. These are the Great Old Ones, titles corresponding to the 9 Sephiroth. After reading it, Klein sighed inwardly. If he and Emperor Ozol knew this mysticism knowledge earlier, neither of them would have ended up in their present situations. Fucking literally. At certain times, even without using beyond their powers, knowledge is completely equivalent to power. The titles of the combined pathways of Earth and Moon are somewhat different from Mother Goddess of Depravity. From the looks of it, it is indeed just part of her, which means that the title of authority left from the outer deities on the moons is Mother Goddess of Depravity, Origin of Evil, Indestructible. By the same logic, the Mother Tree of Desire's full name should be Mother Tree of Desire, Heartless God. Perpetual Blatherer, the situation regarding the Son of Chaos isn't very clear. It's as though he vanished and no one can fully understand him. Klein nodded. And no one can fully understand him. It's not a phase, Mom. Nobody understands me. He's just an emo 12-year-old. Clyde nodded indiscernibly. Sorry, I shouldn't make jokes. This is serious stuff. He then asked, from the looks of it, the Omnipotent and Omniscient is the strongest, the Lord of Mysteries, and the space-time in one are ranked 2nd. The rest are ranked 3rd. This was deemed by the numbers of Beyonder pathways each needed, excluding the outer deities. Adam looked at the blasphemy slightly, said, that's not how it is. The number of authorities has a certain connection to the level of status, but not entirely. The corresponding characteristics, power, and symbol are equally important. After the original creator split up, the 3 pillars stood above all the Great Old Ones. One of the God Almighty, Omnipotent and Omniscient. The other was the Lord of Mysteries, the King of Space and Time. And the last was Mother Goddess of Depravity, Origin of Evil. I don't know. I don't think she's that bad. I honestly just think she's a girl boss. Upon hearing Adam's last sentence, Klein couldn't help but look down at his left sleeve. Rhodes was hiding inside. Rhodes! No wonder Rhodes said that he saw a pillar in support from me. Klein said, suddenly arrived at the state of enlightenment. Thank you. I think, you know what? Justice for Mother Goddess of Depravity. Justice for my girl. She ain't do nothing. Free her. Free my girl. She ain't do nothing. No wonder Rhodes said that he saw a pillar of support from me. Klein was suddenly arrived at the state of enlightenment, and he was a little more convinced by the visionary Adam had said. At that moment, Adam added in an accurate pace. Currently, the first 2 pillars only exist in the form of Sephiroth, and after the Mother Goddess of Depravity had the brood hive and 2 Beyonder pathways separated from her, she became not much different from the other deities. Only her symbol as a pillar remains. If it wasn't for the blood-stained stake in Klein's chest. Oh, yeah, Klein. I keep forgetting that as they're, like, sitting here, Klein's just, like, bleeding out and it has, like, a stake in his heart. And he just... he's just sitting there dying. I shouldn't laugh, but I keep forgetting that that's happening. Imagine that he and Adam were friends. Or him as a pillar remains. If it wasn't for the blood-stained stake in Klein's chest, Klein definitely would have felt the ambience was great for... He's just like, he's all pale. Would have felt that the ambience was great for conversation. The moments when his mind trailed, he even imagined that he and Adam were friends and were happily discussing some mysticism knowledge, waiting for his child, Amon, to return home from dinner. My brother was my father, who was my friend, who was my confidant. Of course, I'm dinner. Yeah, he is. I have to say that the spectator's ability to influence others' knowledge, experience, and state are really too powerful. As Klein told himself to be on guard, he asked in puzzlement. I thought that the outer deities like the Mother Goddess of Depravity, who has 2 or even 3 Sephiroth, are considered pillars. Adam looked down at the silver cross pendant hanging across his chest and said, she only has 1 Sephiroth. Under normal circumstances, the Sephiroth can't be separated. Only when an original creator splits the created an embodiment of convergence and separation did the Sephiroth tear apart, allowing some of them to be sucked into our planet. Crazy. In other words, the person... Okay, here's the thing. This is all great information. This still doesn't explain why Klein was put in the cocoon. I still haven't been explained as to why Klein was thrown in a cocoon. I just realized that. In other words, the present Sephra and the Mother Goddess of Depravity is incomplete. The future Great Old One's Mother of All won't be completed. Great Old One, Klein pressed. Adam's lips twitched as he thought he was smiling. Or was so at the beginning, but the Sephirot has the ability to mend itself. The present Mother Goddess of Depravity, Sephra, isn't complete, and the brood hive can also create the good old ones itself. The only problem is that the Mother Goddess of Depravity can only use a portion of the pillar she symbolizes unless she has fused with the brood hive again. This also has to be cursed in the birth of life of a... Yes, Klein. This also caused the birth of life and the feminist powers in the entire universe to undergo certain anomaly. However, thousands of years of time at astronomical scales in very short periods of time, and the corresponding influence hasn't spread. If any outer deity to obtain the Sephirot, this is a neighboring theirs, making equivalent to having two Sephirot. I can't predict what will happen before that. Only the original creator had contained more than singular Sephra. However, as long as he awakens, he will definitely split apart. Klein nodded and asked thoughtfully. In the beginning, the creator accommodated at least 9 Sephrot. This doesn't mean that having 2 Sephrot or even 3 will not result in problems. There should be a critical point. No one can verify this at the moment. Adam held the silver cross in his pendant and in front of his chest and said, I'm guessing that some existence have attempted it before. After all, convergence is a very strong instinct, but the outcome is unknown. Which existences? Klein rubbed his body across a wooden stake and struck to his chest. Adam cast his gaze at the gigantic cross and was more than 100 meters tall in front of him and calmly said, the God Almighty from the early First Epoch. He can also be called the Primordial One. In addition, there's also the Lord of Mysteries, the one that you often recite. As he spoke, Adam turned to look at Klein and said in an imitating manner, the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. These two seemed to have vanished. The outcome of their attempts didn't seem to be too good. Klein hadn't thought about what he was to say when Adam turned his head and looked at the second blasphemy slate. What I can be sure of is that some Sephrot can be accommodated at the same time. In this universe, there's a hidden fourth pillar. It represents everything, including the end of the Great Old Ones. In the universe itself, the corresponding to Sephrot, River of Eternal Darkness, and City of Calamity. Simply put, if Evernight can become the eternal darkness, singularity of all space, time, and one, she can further occupy 2 pathways of Demoness and Red Priest, accompanying the City of Calamity and becoming the true fourth pillar. However, when this happens, she will either enter a deep sleep, be passively split apart, or it will cause the entire universe, including her and us, to be annihilated, starting everything all over again. Never expected that. Once above the sequence level is reached, the symbolism is more important than authority. Adam, no, the ancient sun god's mysticism knowledge is simply too terrifying. As expected, the quasi-great old one. Klein sighed when he heard that. He thought and said, in other words, a demigod from the sleepless pathway can transfer to the Demoness pathway. That's right. Adam looked straight ahead. But in that case, there's no way to become a great old one unless one thinks of a way to separate the bionic characteristics from before. As Klein looked up, he read the demigod potion formulas of the spectator, sleepless, and arbiter pathways and changed the topic. Where did the potion formula related to the great old ones come from? The first blasphemy slate didn't seem to contain them when they were hidden in different sequence 0 potions. Adam's expression changed slightly and his face seemed to be more radiant. After I gained initial control of the omnipotent and omniscient authority, I began to deduce the method and pathways to become a great old one. Finally, I found a suitable formula and figured out the different symbolism. Unfortunately, at the time, the primordial one had also awoken inside me. Therefore, when the ancient sun god perished, you used a portion of your body and will to create a second blasphemy slate. Klein sighed and said, from now on, there will be a light for the apocalypse. It was a really big bug. I don't even know what kind of bug it was, but it was like, it flew into the window, and then it tried to like go, and then it kept flying up and down, and then it flew off. But it was really creepy. It also ended the chaotic battle between the deities due to anger, emotions, and other reasons. It initiated the area of working towards becoming a great old one. Adam maintained his previous expression and didn't say anything. Klein fell silent after a few seconds and suddenly asked, "What kind of humanity did you fabricate in the marionette of mine?" Adam turned his head and said with clear eyes, he was too tired. He wanted rest and freedom, even if it was only for a few seconds. Klein kept not knowing how to respond. Why did you address him as Garamond Sparrow, why didn't you address him as Garamond Sparrow, but refer to him as that marionette? Adam asked warmly, as though he was trying to straighten out his thoughts and members of his congregation. Klein just needs a break. Klein just needs a nap. Klein turned his head and looked at him and suddenly smiled and said, "I'm Garamond Sparrow. Garamond Sparrow is a part of me. If I separate them, even if I can escape your divine kingdom, it will be difficult for me to avert the fate of losing control." Aww. Having said that, Klein paused and looked ahead. He asked in a deep voice, "You only have godhood left. The roasted archipelago." Because I'm gonna start tearing up. He just needs a nap. Roast Archipelago, city of Generosity Bay. After returning here, Verdu Abraham learned that the god of war was rather active existence in the Fourth Epoch, and it was possible for him to respond to believers. Then he hired a poor person who willingly risked his life to pray to the god of war to confirm that there was no danger. Oh my god, no! That's called exploitation. And the price of all that was 300 gold pounds. Now he received a report that not only was the poor person not dead, he even had some of his wishes fulfilled. Okay. Oh my god. Prepare. Guys, we're doing a ritual. We're doing a ritual. Blue Mountain Island, within a primitive forest, worried that official beyonders would discover the ritual outside the city. Verdu Abraham, who was finished making preparations, used separate sealed artifact to teleport away from Bayham and arrived at the It's not somewhat. It's some place. I don't know why I keep wanting to say what. Some place that was nearly uninhabited. Rubbing the pain in his ribs, Verdu took off the classical robe and placed it aside. Following that, he set up the altar and candles and burnt the corresponding essential oils, extracting herbal power, etc. After finishing the setup, Verdu took 2 steps back and lowered his voice in a chant to ancient Hermes. The great god of war, the symbol of iron and blood, the ruler of chaos and strife. The howling wind echoed in the dark forest. Amidst the rustling of the branches and leaves, 2 of the candles on the altar suddenly emitted crackling sounds. The corresponding candle flames rose from the sides of the sapling to the towering tree. At the same time, the color of the candlelit changed from orange to bright white. The wind that passed through the forest became even more intense. 2 fiery pillars of the fire intertwined together, twisting into blurry and huge figures. At that moment, Verdu Abraham felt the indescribable gaze cast from high above into his body. He hurriedly bowed his head and said, "Great god of war, your lowly believer would like to pray for your help." As he spoke, he kept adjusting his attitude and tried his best to remain calm. He knew that his family books and most important thing to take note of when praying to the god of war was to not be angry. The massive figure formed from the building, white flames constantly spewed out of the building, used a language that Verdu could understand but had no idea what was saying. "Lowly mortal, a god is not used to satisfying your wishes. Speak, say your prayers, and I'll decide whether to help you in the end." Verdu had already drafted out his request, so he had said in some thought, "Great god of war, what should I do to make my ancestor Mr. Dor Bethel Abraham return to the real world?" "A ritual. Sacrifice a bizarre sorcerer, a secret sorcerer, and a parasite. You should already know about this," the flaming giant said in a deep and dignified manner. It's the same answer given by Dorian's student. Verdu sighed and said, "Great god of war, what must I pay to request you to complete this ritual for me?" The flaming giant looked down at the astrologer and said, "The conditioning price is not something you can afford. Your pale and puny soul..." Pale and puny soul isn't even qualified to be embers. Joseph Perdue was disappointed and abnormally depressed. Bro, if somebody said that my pale and puny soul doesn't even qualify to be embers, no. Cutting the rituals cut short, I'm done. I'm packing up, moving to the countryside, and living a life of seclusion for the rest of it. Like, no. No. That's so mean. Sacrifice. But Mr. Door can... Besides, I'm in a good mood today. Sacrifice the portion of your blood to me. As a mark of the contract, I will request the corresponding price from Mr. Door. It's possible. Verdu subconsciously had his suspicions, but after some thought, he felt that there was nothing wrong with it. Indeed, only his ancestor, Bethel Abraham, had the right to trade with the secret existence like the god of war. He's just selling Bethel Abraham's soul. As for whether Mithridor was... I don't know why I said that with a lisp. As for whether Mr. Door was willing to proceed with the deal, Verdu had never considered it. From this point of view, everyone who had exiled and sealed state would undoubtedly want to escape, even if they had paid a huge price. Yes, great god of war. After pondering for a moment, Verdu agreed. Then he changed the ritual and added a sacrifice and bestowment part to the ritual. He then used a metal dagger to pierce through his arm and let the dark red blood. When the blood turned into red pearls and passed through the door of sacrifice and bestowment, it became extremely dark, as though there was countless monsters lurking in it. In this next second, the object was spat out and behind the illusory door. It was a semi-transparent meat blob with silvery tentacles on the meat blob. Twisted maggots crawled out one after another. Upon seeing this object, Verdu had turned dizzy, as though large amounts of glunk had been injected. Not glunk. Gunk. Had been injected into it. At this moment, the flame landed, enveloping his body, turning into a vision of red. With the layers of red light, Verdu no longer suffered any abnormalities in looking at the blob of meat. Right on the heels of that, other objects were spat out of the door of sacrifice and bestowment. It was a bird with a deformed head. Every single feather shimmered with faint stellar radiance. Strands of insects-like brilliance drilled into the body and occasionally emanated out. Worms of stars. Is this a monster with the secret sorcerer beyond a characteristic? The previous one corresponded to Bizarro Sorcerer. Indeed, secret sorcerers and Bizarro Sorcerers were only names of potions. They aren't just referring to humans. It's the same with the title of demigods, unless the terms half-man is added to the title. Verdu has a deep understanding of the pathway, allowing him to understand the current situation. And this means that the ritual to help Mr. Door escape could be done by sacrificing demigod monsters to the seer, apprentice, and marauder pathways. Furthermore, there was no need for Verdu to do it himself. The great god of war had already prepared everything. This made it difficult for Verdu to suppress the joy in his heart. He looked at the door of sacrifice and bestowment with a light of anticipation, waiting for the third sacrifice to be spat out. In just a second, the object flew out from the darkness behind the door and landed at the altar. It was an unconscious crow. It was an unconscious crow. Of course, it only looked like a crow. Its right eyes had a right ring of black, and its feathers were almost transparent. Oh, and its rings, the monster corresponding to Parasite. Verdu was delighted and sincerely praised the god of war. Inside the corpse cathedral, you only have godhood left? Klein asked in a low voice as he looked at the huge crosses in front of the room. He felt that using a certain identity for a particular person to revive definitely had problems. Even if the identity of the person had a real body, real beyond her characteristics, and a certain level of self-awareness, it still wouldn't be nearly perfect. And Adam's behavior had deepened his suspicions. Sitting behind him, Adam, who was dressed in a simple white robe, didn't show any change in expression. He maintained his composure when preaching. Yes, I'll only be complete if I fuse with true. Indeed, Klein smiled and said, although the true creator... I'll only be complete if I fuse with true. No, he's got a little nickname. True creator is an embodiment of negative personalities and extreme emotions. He has also inherited your humanity. That's why he went mad. Adam appeared to speak about a stranger. Klein thought for a moment before interpreting the remaining contents of the second blasphemy slate. He asked if the other two of you are really fused as one. Who among you will take center stage? This is what we have been completing for after we awaken, Adam said, and he released his hand holding a silver cross pendant. Therefore, you obtained the first blasphemy slate through Amon, hoping to use it to gain control of the Chaos Sea and gain the upper hand. Klein was enlightened as he nodded with a frown. All of you seem to have a tacit understanding regarding this matter. The true creator has never made an issue out of your identity and used external forces to deal with you. This is between us, Adam replied calmly. Klein fell silent for a few seconds before staring at the blasphemy slate. I have a nagging feeling that the Red Angel's death and many of the things that happened during the Fourth Epoch weren't that simple. Klein kept asking and probing. Apart from trying to understand more secrets and gain more knowledge, he was stalling for time and maintaining their present interaction. Compared to being hypnotized by Adam and turning muddle-headed or sleeping directly, he wished to stay awake. With this in mind, Klein lowered his head and looked at the blood-stained wooden stake embedded in his chest. He felt the pain it brought was so real. Why do you say that? Adam asked in return as if he would begin praying at any moment. Klein deliberated over his words and said, before the Black Emperor returned, the Solomon Emperor only had one true god, the true creator, and the Red Priest's uniqueness. The nobles or powers who supported Alista Tudor occupied the fourth uniqueness of visionary, door, error, and fool. Together, even adding on the king of angels, Ouroboros, they wouldn't have been able to fend off the six orthodox deities like Evernight and company. Furthermore, they still had the justicular uniqueness on hand. In such a situation, even if you didn't plan on scheming to target the Red Angel, no one will suspect you. Of course, a crazy blood emperor might be more useful to you. Adam's gaze remained unchanged as he stared at the huge cross. You don't understand because you don't know enough. In the Fourth Epoch, apart from the three great empires and the true deities of the kings of angels behind them, there were also the Demoness sect in the Moses Aztec order. There was also the Abyss infiltration and secretly developed artisans, as well as the southern continent's Balaam. And that wasn't all. In addition, there were many crucial factors at stake. Klein nodded thoughtfully and said, for example, the conflict between the six deities. Adam smiled warmly and said, more than that. Without waiting for Klein to ask further, Adam added calmly, you should have been to Bansi. Klein's heart stirred as he opened his mouth but didn't say a word. Adam continued, in addition, after I perished, the invitation on reality by the outer deities clearly deepened. In the ancient place above the great fog, due to the lack of response in the prayer light representing Bernadette, it kept expanding and contradicting, emitting ripples and halos. This provoked the vortex formed by the transparent maggots. It practically failed its slippery tentacles and lashed towards that direction. After repeated misses, one of the tentacles touched the corresponding prayer light. After Bernadette received no response, she held the magic wishing lamp and walked to the window of the captain's cabin and took a deep breath of the deep blue. Take in the deep blue sea. She wasn't impendent, nor did she attempt to use her powers of prophecy, patiently waiting for the further developments. After a few minutes of grayish-white fog suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Right on the heels of that, the fog was dyed golden, as though it was coated in a layer of thick, sticky syrup. Bernadette immediately bowed her head and looked at the magic wishing lamp in her hand. She saw that the wick and the mount of the lamp had automatically ignited itself. Above the grey fog, in an ancient pallet beside the fool's chair, the paralight, which was the size of a human head, instantly occupied the distorted, blurry golden figure. The figure's gaze penetrated the light and prevented the grayish-white fog looking at the maggot vortex that was attempting to destroy everything around it. His voice immediately reverberated with Sephra Castle, dignified and grand. You actually lost control. The tone of the genie was clearly mocking. He didn't care whether the crazy words of spirit could understand him. At that moment, the strange door of light formed. The countless balls of light appeared above the chair of the fool that had already collapsed. It was faint, discernible, and emanated a bright light, forming a complicated symbol in midair. The symbol originally existed behind the fool's chair, formed a pupilless eye and contorted lines. As the symbol took form, the strange light became fainter and eventually completed fusing into the space. In the next second, Klein's voice came from the symbol representing the fool. Oh my god. I didn't think they were going to use the genie this volume. I thought we were going to wait till next volume, but I knew he was going to get used at some point. Genie, I want to make a deal with you. The blurry and distorted figure immediately laughed. I said that you would eventually agree. After laughing for a few seconds, Genie calmed down and said, I was just wondering how is it possible for the new owner of Sapphire Castle to so easily lose control. This was in preparation I made for the worst case scenario. The voice in the symbol of the fool wasn't implanted patient at all. Genie laughed and said, Aren't you afraid that I'll raise the price at the last minute? Kleiner pleaded unhurriedly. This is just one of my preparations, but for you, it might be the only chance for many years. Genie's light gold figure swayed as though it had been blown by a gust of winds as a grand voice sounded. My condition is the same as before. As long as you can remove the seal and release me, I will take what belongs to me back to the cosmos. I will leave the rest to you and grant you 3 wishes. Of course, from the looks of it, you seem to need my advance payment. Klein's voice sounded again from the symbol of the fool. The promise I'll give you is to send the magic wishing lamp into the cosmos before the end of 1368, in the Epoch Age. As for how you get out of the predicament, that's on your own problem. My request is even simpler. I only need 2 wishes. This is a deal I am talking about. Whether you agree with it is up to you. 1368 was the year when the greatest old one's barrier disappeared. It was acknowledged by the world's prophets as the apocalypse. The blurry and distorted figure fell silent for a few seconds before saying, If you don't remove the seal, the wishes I can grant will be limited. Once it exceeds a certain level, it will be granted in extremely twisted fashion. Inside the symbol of the fool that was cast in a brilliant light, Klein's calm voice sounded. You can fulfill the 2 wishes I need now. The genie fell silent and didn't speak for a long time. Bayham inside the primitive forest, Verdu, who was burning up both internally and externally, didn't waste any time. According to the god of war's instruction, he modified the altar and engraved the correct symbols, music, magic labels, and strange patterns. He was originally worried that the 3 demigod monsters would suddenly wake up when the ritual was ready. The sacrificial items remained unconscious, unable to resist. After placing the squirming meat blob and deformed starbird and the white raven with dark eye circles onto the spot, Verdu looked at the only candle in the altar and lit it. Then he took a few steps back and chanted solemnly in Jotun. Great door of all doors, guide of all endless cosmos, key to the mysterious world, I pray for your response, praying for you to descend onto this world. Before he could finish the sentence, 3 loud bangs sounded from the altar. The 3 demigod monsters from the corresponding Bizarro Sorcerer, Secret Sorcerer, and Parasite seemed to be held by an invisible hand. They only struggled slightly before exposing, turning into blobs of flesh and blood that shimmered with different colors. The flesh and blood seemed to have a life of its own. Under the guidance of some indescribable force, they gathered in the air, forming strange and filthy symbols. Countless symbols combined together, forming a huge door that was still squirming like flesh and blood. One of them was more than 5 meters tall. The door stood on the altar, was pitch black inside, and it was unknown where it went. Flames from the candle representing Mr. Door suddenly soared, illuminating the entire door, flesh and blood illuminating the darkness within. In the darkness, there were tiny balls of stellar light condensing into spherical light. On closer inspection, they looked like strange insects and bent bodies. The spherical light rapidly rose, forming a gigantic arm that passed through the doors of flesh and blood. This arm, which clearly didn't belong to humans, pressed against the altar and forcefully squeezed out, causing the entire door of blood and flesh to snake. Everything in the forest and entire island began to shake as though there was an earthquake. Verdu watched the scene happily and his vision suddenly blurred. Something fell from his face onto the bushes. Verdu subconsciously lowered his head and saw the eye with bludgeoning blood vessels rolling around. His nose, ears, and remaining eye, as well as his muscles, plopped onto the ground one after another, each sleeping with stellar radiance. His body collapsed and his flesh blood completely collapsed. At that moment, the arm finally squeezed through the door, flesh and blood, and attempted to pull out the rest of the body. In the darkness behind the door, thick lightning bolts formed a storm and descended, but they were swallowed by the sudden appearance of blood-colored tide. Finally, a gigantic figure formed, and the pure spherical lights passed through the door of flesh and blood. In the next second, the spherical light began to collapse and fold as though they were going to undergo a qualitative change. Following that, dark cracks appeared out of the void in the surrounding forest. These cracks directly engulfed the different parts of the trees, turning them into strange shapes. At the same time, the hurricane from unknown origins blew out from the crack and swept in all directions. The entire Blue Mountain Island and Bayham was on a tremble as though they were about to sink. Inside the cathedral waves, Alger Wilson, who was vexed over falling to a momentarily Verdu after he teleported, suddenly heard the sound of doors opening. Every door in the city was open automatically at that moment. Alger's turned his head and looked into the forest outside the city and seemed to the source of an anomaly. The moment the door opened, Derek, who had been woken up by the earthquake, frowned. In a city like Backlund, Trier, and St. Millem, all things could be called door open. Above the great fog in the half-collapsed ancient palace, the crazy maggot vortex intrinsically attacked the light golden figure of the fool symbol, but nothing came out to it. After nearly 5 minutes, Genie suddenly chuckled. You really aren't him, otherwise I'd have to distort the promise you made just now and made his seal be removed automatically. This effect can only be achieved by twisting the original owner's words. You previously used the method to realize that I'm not the Lord of Mysteries. Klein's voice sounded from the symbol of the fool. Genie scoffed and said, I have at least 10 ways to verify that it's him. Without waiting for Klein's reply, the pale gold figure smiled and said, You don't seem like you can maintain this state for very long. Alright, the deal has been made. After I complete your 2 wishes, you must send the magic wishing lamp into the cosmos before 1368 of this epoch. Genie's voice gradually turned solemn, as if he was proclaiming a law. At that moment, he seemed to have established the particular rule based on this deal. There was no need to worry that Klein would go back on his word in the future. If you can't fulfill this promise, even if you become the Lord of Mysteries, you will perish and split, warned the genie as he asked. Tell me your 2 wishes. Take note. Don't involve higher level beyond characteristics and don't exceed the limit of my present powers. Otherwise, the wish will be granted in a distorted way. This is a rule that has been set. I cannot violate it. In the symbol of the fool that was outlined by the bright light, Klein's voice calmly said, The first wish. The 2 wishes that Bernadette Gustave previously made are to be brought under my name. This should be very simple for you. The genie immediately said with a smile, Indeed, you want to make use of a terrible outcome for making a 3rd wish to deal with your current predicament. Not bad. This is something that stems from my level. I can't satisfy your wish and let you die in pain. Klein's voice sounded again. The 2nd wish. Let my utopia give rise to a corresponding region in the spirit world. This doesn't involve the advancements of a sequence, nor does it have anything to do with the higher level beyond characteristics. You can definitely do it. Genie's light gold figure wavered before he said with a smile, Your wish will be granted. Inside the corpse cathedral, Klein touched the bloody wooden stake on his chest and thought he was considering how to get out. During this process, he casually asked Adam, You didn't attempt to become a god in the 4th epoch because you didn't obtain 0-08? It was one factor. More importantly, there are still many latent dangers that haven't been resolved at that time. Adam looked at the huge cross in front of him with a warm gaze. Klein turned his head to the side and looked at the visionary and said, For example, during that period, that remnant will of the primordial one is still very strong. Before he finished the sentence, a large amount of red blood flowed down Klein's head. However, the corner of his lips curled slightly. Adam turned his head and looked at Klein. His limpid, like cold other eyes reflected the face that was stained with blood. His expression remained unchanged, and there was a hint of pity and warmth. It was as if God was looking down upon the world. Klein smiled at him and said in a cracked part, This trend on his body caused him to collapse into a pool of blood. In the pool of blood were his clothes, the blood-soaked stake, and the ancient mirror. In the corpse cathedral in the divine kingdom of visionary Adam, Klein had died a strange death. Adam, dressed in a simple white robe, looked at the scene before him. With gentleness and calmness, it was unknown if he had experienced it, or if he had avoided having any emotions. In the ancient palace above the great fog, the crazy maggot vortex instantly stopped as they broke apart into numerous frozen dead worms of spirit. In the next second, these worms' spirit turned illusory and became stained with grayish white as though they had fused into the fog of history. Then they came back to life. As they shimmered with the dark glow, they gathered together. In just a few seconds, the worms of spirit resembled into a figure. It was Klein Moretti, who had black hair, brown eyes, and a formal suit. With the return of the owner of Sephir Castle, the destroyed molten table and the 22 high-backed chairs rapidly restored to normal. The junk scattered all over the floor was piled up again. Klein picked up the staff of the stars embedded with the various gems and sat at the seat of the belonging to the fool. The entire space above the grey fog quacked as boundless and mighty invisible forces surged out. Klein immediately nodded at the golden figure that occupied Bernadette's prayer. I will fulfill my promise. Jeannie laughed and said, It looks like you haven't inherited his cunningness and shamelessness. Very good. As soon as he said that, the blurry and distorted golden figure rapidly receded, no longer projecting itself into Bernadette's prayer light. Well done.
I know I said quacked. As Klein separated the worm's spirit to respond to Queen Mystic's prayers, he lowered his head and made a wish to himself. I wish to be restored to how I was like before tonight. When his main body died, he had only taken away the core portions of the Miracle Invoker potion beyond characteristics, leaving behind the remnants of Adam's corpse cathedral. He was unable to retrieve them. Of course, Klein still had a large portion of the characteristics in the worm's spirit in his body above the Great Fog and the remaining marionettes in Utopia. Zeratil didn't need any additional Bionic characteristics, nor did he want them to end up affecting his condition. Therefore, he didn't directly use the law of convergence of Bionic characteristics to suck up all the characteristics at the same pathway in Utopia. He collected them using different methods which were relatively slow and would require a certain amount of time. After making this wish, Klein summoned the curtain, draped it behind him, and snapped his fingers. Inside the junk pile, the Seer Pathway Sequence 9 and 3 Bionic characteristics that were separated from the curtain previously floated up at the same time, transforming into pure light dots that drilled into Klein's body. His condition instantly returned to the time when he was almost done digesting the Miracle Invoker potion. Apart from the lack of physical body, was no different from when he was attacked. Right on the heels of that, Klein attacked his gaze to Utopia, which was closely connected to him. Inside Utopia, the hooded, black-robed Zeratil, whose face was covered in white whiskers, stood on the roof of St. Ariana Cathedral. Beside him were Rosal Gustav, William Augustus, and Abomination Sua, his historical projection. They patiently waited for the door of the Corpse Cathedral to open and for Gammon Sparrow to walk out. He controlled some of his marionettes' dealings with a few of the mutated Utopia marionettes, leaving the remaining portions of the marionettes which remained normal to the end. At that moment, dense illusory spirit body threads suddenly floated up from the rigid Utopia marionettes into the infinitely high height away. They instantly came to life and turned around, looking at Zeratil and his historical projection. The pairs of eyes sparkled in the darkness. At the same time, the huge shadow descended from the faint grayish-white fog, enveloping the entirety of Utopia. Zeratil and his historical projections instinctively raised their heads and looked at the sky that suffused the faint gray fog. Sealing is prohibited here. In the next second, William Augustus' historical projection raised a sword in his right hand and solemnly made an announcement. The shadow that enveloped Utopia immediately shook as many gaps appeared. It was unable to completely isolate the marionette town from the outside world. Rosal Gustav's historical projection immediately transformed into a torrent of information that surged towards Klein's remaining marionettes. In an attempt to interfere with the movement that the historical projection of the Abomination Sua, it attacked the shadow that appeared like a curtain in a bid to expand the corresponding gaps. Zeratil extended his hand and grafted the void in front of him and another island of the Berserk Sea that he had previously fixed. Following that, as long as he took a step forward, he would be able to leave Utopia. At that moment, Klein's marionette snatched the opportunity before the torrent of information entered the spirit body. At the same time, they opened their mouths and chanted in Jotun, Leodero. At the Forsaken Land of the Gods, with the remnant divine powers of Tyrant, Klein could directly trigger the power of the deity based on the name alone. But that wasn't the case in the outside world. As for whether or not he wanted to punish the fellow that for calling out his true name, it was directed by the Lord of Storms. Klein had his marionettes recite the honorific name at the same time to get the Lord of Storms to cast his gaze over. As one of the members of the 5 pathways of the Omnipotent and Omniscient, the Lord of Storms was probably one of the true deities who didn't wish for Adam's plot to succeed. If Adam became the Lord of Mysteries, the King of Space and Time, this time it would be a very dangerous situation. He would have to constantly worry that the Son of the Creator would deal with him and help Adam or the true Creator ascend to the position of the Lord of the astral world. Therefore, compared to the Evernight Goddess and the Earth Mother, Lord of Storms, Eternal Blazing Sun, and the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, were probably the existences who didn't wish to see Adam and Amon succeed. If there was a chance, Klein planned on greeting his marionette to continue shouting Acusis and Herabergen. Utopia surrounding instantly turned gloomy, as if it contained an indescribable wrath of nature. Before Zeratil could take a step, in the night sky and sleep pound produced different colors of lightning. They bare their fangs and brandished their claws as they wantonly expanded. They seemed to envelop the entire sky in the sea of lightning. Before the deafening sound could be heard, the lightning blasted in the torrent rain at Utopia. The Rorschach Archipelago, new city of silver, the top of the spire. Derek Berg, who was looking at the source of the earthquake, heard the sound of doors and opening windows at the same time. Furthermore, it repeated thousands of times. Although it didn't bring him any direct danger, the bizarre change still made Derek very wary. With some hesitation, he pretended to seek out the current chief Waith Chairman and suggest that the god-level sealed artifact, Proof of Glory, he wanted to first protect the new City of Silver and the nearby New Moon City. Then he decided to pray to Mr. Fool based on the progress of the anomaly. Just as he turned around and walked to the door, Waith Chairman, who had a dark blue symbol engraved on his head, walked out from the corridor's light. He said in a deep voice, "The sealing underground has failed. The seal has failed." Derek instinctively believed that this had something to do with the anomaly in Blue Mountain Island. Compared to the doors and the windows opening and the consequences of the seal's failure were extremely terrifying. Immediately using the Proof of Glory, Derek said without hesitation, "This was a god-level sealed artifact that could be used for a short period of time. It has once helped the City of Silver avert repeated disaster from the Forsaken Land of the Gods, allowing them to persist until the present era to obtain salvation." Derek's thoughts were very clear. He was using the Proof of Glory to suppress the other gods-level sealed artifacts, gifts of the land. The suppression effect would soon affect the same-level sealed artifacts that would have negative effects on the surroundings. Waith Chairman didn't say anything else. He immediately made up his mind and brought Derek underground using the light as concealment. Proof of Glory required at least 2 saints before it could be utilized. This was also the reason why Waith Chairman didn't immediately head underground and came to find Derek first. Of course, he wanted to make use of it, if there were tricks to do so, but he had to be prepared in advance to brand a corresponding mark on his body. Bayham Cathedral of Waves. The bolt of the lightning shot into Alger Wilson's room, turning into a hurried voice. "Your Eminence, most of the underground seals have failed. Only certain items remained in a balanced state thanks to their effects." Alger's brows twitched as he combined it with the phenomenon of opening doors and windows in Bayham City happening at the same time. He sensed that something was amiss. He immediately said to the void, "All of you immediately form groups of 3. Take out grade 2 and 3 sealed artifacts that won't cause immediate danger. Are those with living characteristics from underground to prevent any chain reactions." This was the underground area would become uninhabited. The dangerous sealed artifacts would be able to cause casualties within a short period of time. With the passage of time, with the anomaly of seals losing their effects and past, the mandated punishers would have the time to deal with their items. However, the premise was that they hadn't lost control of the 3 grade 1 sealed artifacts. Once there was a problem with them, the negative effects would soon affect the entirety of Bayham. However, with the seal no longer working, it was very difficult for the 3 items to remain without problems. The first thought that flashed through Alger's mind was to bring along the one whose negative effect had the greatest range. Then, using his own powers to make temporary restrictions, he would fly to the sea and away from Bayham. This wasn't too dangerous for him in a short period of time. After all, it was a demigod. The biggest problem was that the remaining 2 grade 1 sealed artifacts would undoubtedly cause serious damage to Bayham. At least I did my best. Alger felt that this method was safe and could handle the subsequent investigations. From the Church of the Lord of Storms, it was pretty good. His gaze subconsciously looked out the window. It corresponded with a few schools and the workhouses near the cathedral. Alger's reaction, his gaze, fell silent for 2 seconds before, sighing, he continued, "Leave the rest to me." His words transformed into electric waves and transformed into silver lightning that flew underground. Crazy. While transmitting information to the mandated punishers, Alger quickly came up with a plan in his mind. It was to immediately pray to the Lord of Storms, hoping to obtain the Lord's blessing or help. Then he would immediately rush underground and use the Beyonder powers to forcefully suppress the 3 grade 1 sealed artifacts inside Azure Gate. During this process, if the Lord of Storms responded to his prayers or if the abnormality regarding the seals ended in time, there was naturally no need for him to consider any other response. However, if neither of the 2 outcomes occurred, then he began to find difficult and handle the situations. He would seek Mr. Fool's help. To Alger, once he had to do so no matter what method he used or how to conceal it, it would be difficult for him to escape the fate of being suspected. After all, it was unbelievable for a single person to suppress 3 grade 1 sealed artifacts single-handedly. When the time came, his only option was to immediately abandon his post after the abnormality ended, or the seal began working again. This departure would waste all his years of diligence and hard work, causing him to lose his post as cardinal, which he had painstakingly obtained. However, compared to his own life, this was a price he was willing to pay. As for the consequences resulting in him almost not having the chance to obtain the Book of Calamity, Alger didn't care about that in that moment. He had still had a great distance from considering such problems. Of course, the demigod of the Church of Storms and the cardinal had believed that it was definitely under the watch of the Lord of Storms. After abandoning his job and escaping his need for protection and other existences to survive, otherwise his outcome would be unimaginable. And regretting this matter, he could only rely on Mr. Fool. Taking a deep breath, Alger quickly chanted, "The king, ruler over the skies, the emperor who controls the seas, the great god of storms, I pray for your watch and pray for your blessings." After chanting, Alger reached out with his hand, bringing with him a hurricane as he flew underground. About 10 seconds later, outside the Cathedral of Waves, there was a tidal wave that surged into the air. The blue sea water poured down, enveloping the cathedral in thick barrier. Inside the barrier, silver bolts of lightning flashed as they drilled underground. The lightning struck down like torrential rain, illuminating the Utopia, illuminating more than half of the Berserk Sea. After that moment, a pitch-black cathedral with many embedded skulls appeared in midair. It was situated above Zeratel. It drew all the surrounding lightning towards it, causing bolts of lightning to snake across the countless white skies, causing the stained glass to reflect a bright light. In the places Adam's Corpse Cathedral could shelter Zeratel's marionettes, Abomination 2's historical projection, as well as Klein's marionettes, were instantly obliterated by the tremendous lightning. Then, they either vanished or were reduced to tiny marks. Even Roselle Gustav's historical projection that had turned into a flux of information wasn't spared. A strong electromagnetic hurricane wreaked havoc in the city, destroying all information and structure. Taking advantage of the moment the visionary was fending off the tyrant, Zeratel took a step forward and entered the void ahead. And this void was connected to another island, one he had previously set in the Berserk Sea. Using his beyonder powers of the Attendant Mysteries, the distance between the two was reduced to 0. The black-robed, hooded Zeratil quickly vanished into the void, illuminated by lightning, but the second he did appeared on the distant island, but above the Iris's hotel in Utopia. Just a moment ago, when Zeratil was stunned by the might of the storm, Klein, who was in Sephra Castle, took the opportunity to use the curtain that was draped over his body and use the powers of Sephra to forcefully graft the void in front of his target in Iris's hotel. He had secretly changed Zeratil's key arrangement. This was the suppression effect of the King of Angels against a Sequence 1 angel of the same pathway. The careless lightning smote down, enveloping Zeratil, who had long had white whiskers on his face. Zeratil's pitch-black eye didn't show any change in expression. His body rapidly faded and disappeared as bolts of lightning. He had only come to the form of historical void projection. His true body was hiding in a particular fragment in the fog of history. Sitting in the fool chair, Klein immediately cast his gaze in the grayish-white fog below him, as well as the countless spots in the light of the grayish-white fog. He was temporarily unable to find Zeratil because the latter definitely used the secret fragment history that only he and a very small number of existents knew. However, being able to find him didn't mean that Klein could only watch and patiently wait until Zeratil reached his limit and was unable to stay in the fog of history. As the owner of Sephra Castle and the existence with the level of a King of Angels, Klein preliminarily controlled Sephra was already enough to complete many things. In the next second, Klein opened the box of Summon, the Fool card, accommodating it inside his body. In the blink of an eye, he transformed into the Fool, who wore colorful clothes and a gorgeous headdress. He exuded a deep, terrifying aura as well as a somewhat ridiculous feeling. The entire Sephra Castle began to shake gently. The Fool Klein held the end of the star of the staff in his right hand and struck the edge of the long molten table. In the real world, grayish-white fog appeared, one that had a faint, visible ancient palace situated high above. In the ancient and majestic palace, a strange light formed from countless spherical lights quickly outlined itself, emanating an invisible and terrifying suction force. The fog of history instantly bolted as Zeratil's figure quickly appeared in the spot where Klein hadn't lit up. He was holstered up without being able to stop it. Law of beyonder characteristics convergence. With the help of Sephra Castle, Klein projected the convergence power and beyonder characteristics into the fog of history. At this moment, Zeratil's black-robed and hooded figure collapsed and became a pale paper figurine. His true body appeared, one island in the Berserk Sea. He quickly used the attendant of mysteries beyond her powers to connect the convergence inclination effect in various paper figurines. Seizing the opportunity given to him by the paper figurines, Zerto quickly made a wish. I wish for my beyond characteristics to temporarily calm down. Just as he finished speaking and pressed his palms together, he had already caught sight of his fulfilled wish. This allowed him to escape the suction force from Sephiroth Castle, the Fool card, and the Attendant of Mysteries Beyond Characteristics Collective. At the same time, he took a step back and accurately stepped on a milky white rock. The stone had been long connected to somewhere else by him and had been solidified for some form. As Zeratil stepped down, his figure instantly vanished, but it was unknown there. He had gone, but the stone seemed to experience extreme weathering, and it was The Fool Klein cast his gaze down from the infinite height and scanned his surroundings, but he couldn't find Zeratil. This meant that the other party had left his line of sight. Without any hesitation, Klein immediately placed his focus on something else. He had already made all the gems of the Staff of the Stars light up and simulate the Marauder Pathway's ability to deceive rules. He changed the location of his body, revealed the marionette that wasn't in Utopia. Previously, a few residents in Utopia had gone other cities for various reasons. By going there, they would further deepen their relationship with the real world. Klein had chosen to travel enthusiast. He was now in a particular mountain range. In the second half of his resurrection was carried out. Klein took out the Fool card. He summoned the 9 unique Spirit World specialties who had prepared previously and placed them together with the curtain. Right on the heels of that, he used the Star of the Staff to activate the power of Sephiroth Castle, and once again simulated the powers of the Marauder Pathway's ability to deceive the rulers, allowing the 9 Spirit World specialties in the curtain to become part of his body. In the next second, countless fragments of light appeared around the marionette and was halfway up the mountain. And inside the marionette's body was a worm of spirit flew out. It kept fracturing and fused with the fragments of light. Soon the fragments of light condensed into a ball of light. Soon the fragments of light condensed into a ball of light and solidified into Klein's figure. Just as Klein's figure finished outlining, he turned to the transparent maggots and scattered in all directions, allowing the curtain and 9 Spirit World specialties to drop onto the ground. Then the worms of spirit completed the reassembly process, and part of them turned into a half-top hat, a shirt, a vest, a formal suit, and trousers. Klein didn't waste any time. He immediately gripped the curtain and his specialties of the Spirit World and began to carefully concoct the potion. To him, this was the best time to advance to Attendant of Mysteries. On the other hand, the effects of the ritual had been completed. With the help of the genie, this wouldn't last long, and it would gradually disappear. On the other hand, Adam, who was most likely to destroy his ritual, was being suppressed by the Lord of Storms and had no time to interfere. If he were to consume the potion and advance to Sequence 1 at any other time, Klein was really worried the visionary Adam would make use of the sea of collective subconscious and interject the negative emotions into him at a critical moment. That way, losing control was inevitable. The reason why he called Leo Darrow wasn't to deal with Zeratil, but to hold back the true god Adam. During the Attendant of Mysteries ritual, there was no way to use the power of Sephiroth Castle to produce a nuisance from the Divine Kingdom of Advancement. Isolating Klein from the outside world, this would result in the ritual being unable to establish a connection with the corresponding region in the spirit world, resulting in failure. In less than 10 seconds, the portion that was dark as night of sea appeared in Klein's palm. At the same time, the figure left in Sephiroth Castle snapped his fingers, granting a small number of wishes accumulated in the prayer light in the Crimson Star, allowing him to digest the last bit of Miracle Invoker potion. The figure inside Sephiroth Castle immediately faded away, allowing Klein's body to become complete, as that he could consume the potion in his best condition. As the lightning lit up the sea once again, Klein raised his right hand and brought the bottle that came from his marionette to his mouth. He gulped down the potion that was light as air. As an attendant of Mystery's potion entered his body, Klein immediately felt a begrudging feeling. In the blink of an eye, he lost his perception and his body and Worms' spirit. He watched helplessly as they dissipated and fused into the spirit world that could be described with ordinary words or common sense. It was as though he was about to disintegrate or abstract into random pieces of information. At that moment, Klein only barely maintained his consciousness and had self-awareness. Just like that, he floated in the spirit world filled with countless strange figures. After losing the ability to sense his body and beyond characteristics, he began to experience all kinds of thoughts, information, knowledge, symbols, and labels. He completely lost himself and was teetering on the border of fusing with the spirit world. If this continued, Klein would definitely be completely lost, but at that moment there was a connection between the spirit world and the consciousness. That place corresponded to the town. The people inside lived ordinary lives. They had their own names, their stories, their fates. They intertwined with each other, bringing about complete information in the spirit world, which was the concept of abstractness. The town was eventually destroyed by calamity and burned to the dust of history. Klein dispersed like the mist amongst fusing with the spirit world's body. Under the guidance of fate, he fused with the spirit world projection and different utopian marionettes, allowing him to become corporal again. Bam! Deep underground in the cathedral waves, in the room that was no longer sealed, Alger extended his hands and pressed down on the door in front of him. The surface of the door was blue in color, with numerous mysteries, odd reliefs protruding out. It was ajar, and there was no light behind the door. It was unknown which world it was connected to. The darkness seemed to have a life of its own. At this moment, the stream of water suddenly surged out, eroding the surrounding areas. Alger's feet exerted strength, causing the ground to crack and spew out scarlet, nearly white lava. This was a calamity he had created. His goal was to prevent the darkness from advancing. However, after the surging lava entered the darkness, it disappeared without a trace. The darkness shrank back into little and paused for a second before continuing its corrosion. Alger continuously created hurricanes, torrential rains, and lightning calamities, blocking the darkness again and again and again. He held the azure gate firmly with both hands, not letting it open further. If it were to only face this grade 1 sealed artifact, Alger would have been completely fine. He would have even had the capacity to attempt sealing it. But at that moment, he had two similarly dangerous items around him. This forced him to sing loudly, to use his melody of death to influence the surroundings and disrupt the operations of the other sealed artifacts. Then he built a wall formed with blue seawater beside him. However, the wall was slowly being dyed grayish-white, as if he had been petrified. Yet, the pandemonium didn't yield as it extended towards Alger's body. I can last for the most 30 seconds. The Lord of Storm hasn't responded to me the entire time. Thoughts raced through Alger's mind as he expressed his unwillingness and reluctantness. He quickly made a decision. Without any hesitation, he immediately accentuated a hexagonal crystalline snowflake in his palm. It was the mark left behind by the participated in the Tarot Club for the first time. He could substitute the receding of the honorific name of the Mr. Fool to cast his gaze over Blue Mountain Island within a primitive forest. At the door, flesh and blood spherical lights collapsed and converged in an attempt to undergo a qualitative change. They seemed to form a body consisting of the series of doors. The body wore a blood-colored tidal wave and robe as the body constantly warped and changed, reflecting different regions and planets. At that moment, the blinding ray of sunlight shone through the darkness and descended to the astral world, then melting everything it encountered along the way. Other than the rays of sunlight and the indiscernible darkness over the night surge of attempting to devour Mr. Door, Bethel Abraham, who was seeking the advice of a sequence zero, the land where the altar quaked violently, tearing open a huge hole in a bid to devour the door of flesh and blood, and Bethel Abraham to fall deep into the core and face the chaos sea that contained all possible colors and possibilities. Following that, the blurry light seeped out from the void that enveloped the forest, attempting to restore the basic structure in trees, mud, and altar. At the only gap in light, the pair of brass-colored eyes emerged. They stared at the door of flesh and blood, Bethel Abraham hoping to reflect them in his eyes. Mr. Door let out a low roar, causing the blood-colored robe to flare up. The robe connected to the evil tide and surged behind the door of flesh and blood, spreading out the crimson moonlight. The moment it touched the moonlight, the indescribable night that could not be seen gathered in its own. It stretched out the limbs and head, turning into a shadowy female human. It possessed its own life. Its consciousness was no longer controlled by its user. Without any exceptions, the blinding sunlight transformed into a young man wearing fiery armor. This shaking round eyes grew and closed its mouth. The screen that was transformed from a faint yellow light revealed terrifying facial features. Around the brass-colored eyes, eyelash emerged, transforming into wings. These obstructions and interferences fell into chaos, giving Mr. Door a chance for a breather. Seizing the breather, Seizing the opportunity, he entered the final step of becoming a god. At that moment, Mr. Door's flesh and blood suddenly collapsed and covered Mr. Door's body, making him seem to turn into another person. Klein's body seemed to dissociate into countless people as they had their own preferences, their personalities, their determination, their fates. They lived in towns known as Utopia. These people quickly lived their short lifespan walking up under the heavy storm. They came into the senses and realized what the identity was in essence. It was Zhao Minguri and also Klein Marietti. They were also Sherlock Moriarty and Garamond Sparrow, and Dwayne Dantes and Merlin Hermes. One thing could have many names, but its nature wouldn't change. The people who raised their heads and looked up to them for infinity. Sorry, it was like this. From the illusory city in the spirit world, they saw the illusory and thin spirit body threads, and they saw the symbol made up from the pupilless eye and the particularly contorted lines. With the symbol of the core, Klein's figure outlined itself, his eyes tightly shut. Worms of spirit, bits of beyonder characteristics, and bits of self-awareness flew out from the spirit world corresponding to the Utopia area and towards Klein's slightly illusory body, allowing it to slowly become corporal. At this point, there was no clear boundary between Klein's spirit body and the physical body. There was both one and separate, and also a rather delicate state. In other words, the spirit body could be equivalent to the body of flesh and blood. His physical body could also fuse with the spirit body as long as Klein was willing to. He could switch between two states, of course. He could also separate the physical body from the spirit body all of the time, the individual traits, and they could decide based on the mere thought. 2 seconds later, the assembly process was completed. Klein, who was floating in the depths of the spirit world, opened his eyes. His pupils were dark without any light. He had already advanced to sequence 1 and became an attendant of mysteries. Without a sound, the grayish-white fog appeared behind him. Above the fog was an ancient palace. Inside the palace stood a door that was stained bluish-black, formed from countless spherical lights. The door of light appeared rather clearly in the spirit world. It separated out with rather blurry phantom and cast into Klein's body. As the phantom turned into a complicated symbol, it imprinted itself between Klein's brows, and the entire spirit world and the real world outside began to gently shake, as though they had encountered the earthquake from afar. At that moment, Klein's surrounding turned dark as the illusory stars appeared one after another, their surrounding and strange door of light as though they wanted to lump together. In these illusory stars, the largest two overlapped in the corresponding to have an area of the real world. The third, fourth, fifth, sixth stars were located somewhere else. Through these illusory stars, Klein saw Mr. Dor and Amon on a particular island. He saw Antigonus in a dilapidated palace inside the concealed world, and Zeratul, who was hiding somewhere unknown. He saw Pallas Zoras in Leonard's body and the dark demonic wolf Kotar. With the help of the changes caused by further deepening of his control of Sephra Castle, Klein found the angels and the kings of angels corresponding in 3 pathways of mysteries. Of course, such a vision only lasted a few seconds. Once Amon and Zeratul acted and used the correct method to conceal themselves, Klein would no longer be able to lock onto their true bodies. Without any hesitation, Klein raised his right hand and snapped his fingers. The staff of the stars that was originally placed in Sephra Castle had appeared in his palm and also split a portion of the worms of spirits to let them enter Sephra Castle to prevent the abnormalities from responding to his believers. After becoming an attendant of mysteries, Klein controlled over Sephra Castle deep and allowing him to take out items from inside at any moment. In the next second, the various gems on the staff of the stars lit up as Klein's finger vanished from the split world. He instantly wandered to a swamp that arrived in front of Zeratul. Dressed in a hood and a black robe, the white-bearded Zeratul didn't panic. He used his attendant of mystery beyond her powers to make all kinds of connections as he extended his left hand and grabbed onto the void ahead. Gradually, Alger's body turned grayish-white, almost about to petrify. Could it be that Mr. Fool doesn't favor me because of my failure to monitor Verdun? He frowned slightly, wanting to give up, but he stayed underground. At that moment, the grayish-white fog appeared in front of him. All the sealed artifacts fell silent. After Mr. Dor, Bethel Abraham was enveloped by the door of flesh and blood. A familiar voice echoed in his ears. You wish to bring the disaster back to the real world? Bethel Abraham's action instantly slowed down. Give up. I have a way to deal with it. I'll let you sleep and let you get back to the peace you want. The familiar voice sounded again. So, Bethel Abraham seems really cool and all. I don't really know how long we're gonna be getting him, though. It doesn't seem like he's gonna be a character that's sticking around for more than this chapter. I think this is also last chapter, if I'm not mistaken. Crazy. Mr. Door's figure that had shrunk from the ball of light came to a halt as though he had fallen into an intense internal struggle. The layered doors in his body were just a little short of being fully resembled. Amidst the illusory whooshing sounds, the crimson tide that barely squeezed through the gap of the door of flesh and blood came even more turbulent. The blood-colored robe landed heavily, about to envelop Bethel Abraham once again. However, as it descended the brass-colored eyes, the young man in the fairy armor and heavy barrier of light that accentuated terrifying facial features and ground with open eyes and closed mouth, and the shadowy woman vanished silently from the world. In an instant, the blazing sun appeared above the forest. Days replaced the night, causing all the shadows to rapidly disperse. This caused the blood-colored robe to rise once again, scattering even more crimson moonlight, causing all the disturbances to return to their mother embrace. Seizing this opportunity, Mr. Door's illusory eyes closed as he lowered his head. All right. He painfully said the first word after his return to reality. His figure completely froze as he raised his right hand and pressed it to his face. The next second, Mr. Door lifted his head and wore a crystal monocle. Instantly. Bro finally came back and just accepted his fate. What the fuck was that? A beam of light erupted from the monocle, illuminating the entire world. No fucking way. No way. We've been waiting for him to come back for how many volumes? And literally the second he's back, accept his fate. He's like, all right, you know what? You got me. You got me. It was really nice to smell the roses one last time. Wrap it up. Wrap it up real fucking fast. The beam of light erupted from the monocle, illuminating the entire world. At that moment, all the errors of the seals that had failed were fixed. Everything that seemed normal showed errors. All the clocks jumped several seconds forward. The Marauder Sequence Zero Errors ritual was to replace someone during their apotheosis ritual. Oh my god. I love him and I hate him so much. And Mr. Door's return seems to directly trigger his apotheosis ritual. The light converged immediately, and Mr. Door had turned into a Mon with his pointed hat and classical black robe. The blasphemer had held a simple and unadorned key that seemed to be forged from pure starlight in his hand. Above him, the blood-colored robe descended, waiting to embrace him into his arms. Behind him, the crimson sun tide angrily squeezed into the remnants. Holy shit. Of the world, door of flesh and blood, of the last bid to enter the world. In that short moment, the blood-colored moon glowed even brighter, blocking the sun, night, earth, blurry light, and strange white towers outside. Faced with the corruption from the outer deities, Amon's lips curled up slightly. He extended his right hand and took out the abnormality ancient stone slab from his unknown location, the first blasphemy slate. Then he used the stone slab formed of the Chaos Sea to block the remaining opening of the door of flesh. Then he used it as a substitute to receive the falling blood-colored robe. The first blasphemy slate turned illusory as though it was connected to the infinite sea and contained all the possible colors. The sea surged and swallowed the blood-colored robe, blocking the crimson tide from cosmos. The already collapsed door of flesh and blood rapidly shrank before quickly disappearing. The angry and terrifying roar resounded in the air from within. In the next second, the crimson moon appeared in the sky. The color quickly faded and turned pure. On it was a huge, distorted crimson figure. Wearing a pointed hat and classical black robe, Amon adjusted the monocle on his right eye and waved his hand to the crimson figure and the bright moon that were staring at him. He then smiled and bowed slightly in all directions. In the corpse cathedral that had erected giant crosses, where countless skulls were watching with their hollow eyes, Adam, who was dressed in a Savoy robe, took out the look of a careless lightning outside and stained glass. He slowly got up and walked to the pool of blood that Klein left behind. He bent down and picked up the ancient and mysterious mirror. No! A Rhodes! A Rhodes! A Rhodes! Following that, he turned around and walked towards the second blasphemy slate. The first figure that Zeratil summoned out of the fog of history was still Roselle Gustave, who wore a dark red coat embroidered with gold thread and had chestnut-colored curly long hair. To this attendant of mysteries, there was quite a number of angels that he got to know in his long life. There were only a few of them that were stronger than a sequence one knowledge emperor. For example, the Antigonus ancestor before he became the half-fool, angel of fate Ouroboros, and the red of white brass, who could indirectly obtain the strength of red angel. But under such circumstances, Zeratil believed that summoning Roselle Gustave's historical void projection first was safer. Before the Antigonus family's ancestor became the half-fool, he too was a sequence one attendant of mysteries. Therefore, he would be suppressed to the enemy who had deeper control of Sephra Castle. And the level that surpassed almost King of Angels, after all, his enemy was closer to a true god. After Zeratil chose to cooperate with the Rose School of Thought, Adam, the success rate of summoning the Angel of Fate, Ouroboros, would undoubtedly drop. It was suitable for him to attempt to the critical moment. The red of war brass that could borrow the red angel's powers didn't possess the strength directly, so the actual effects that produced weren't even stronger than that of the knowledge emperor Roselle Gustave. In comparison, Zeratil would definitely choose the historical projection and was most familiar with, the easiest to successfully summon. His plan was to seize the opportunity that Gehrman Sparrow had directly wandered here without preparing any historical void projections in advance, to use Knowledge Emperor Roselle Gustave, the Red War Army Brass, and Abomination Suap, to hold back and leave him enough time to create a miracle for himself. As soon as Roselle's figure appeared, he immediately condensed into complicated and illusory symbols as his eyes embed and infused large amounts of meticulous and useless knowledge about his target's mind, causing his brain to explode. At the same time, Zeratil used the various connections he had set up in advance to move himself. This swamp was his home ground, and he made a slippery, transparent tentacle penetrate the hood, black robe, and stretch into the fog of history. He summoned the red and white brass. At that moment, Roselle Gustave's historical projection suddenly turned his head and used the subtle connection to look towards Zeratil's true form. Zeratil's mind was instantly filled with information and useless knowledge. His brain nearly exploded as he was unable to process his thoughts for a short period of time. He froze on the spot, his gaze not even changing. The historical projection, knowledge emperor Roselle Gustave, and he had summoned the betrayal him. Klein was both surprised and unsurprised by this outcome. It was surprising because he was doing his own thing. The worms of spirit in Sephra Castle had already grafted Roselle's present state and concealed the state that Klein had met. The surprising thing was that Adam had never reminded Zeratil to be careful of Roselle Gustave. Klein had previously sensed the coincidence in certain matters, his preparation including using the fool symbol connection to Roselle Gustave's seal. Though the corresponding prayer point of light, he could throw a worm of spirit that contained certain words of intent to his fellow earthling who was deep state, awakening him. Then using the miracle, he could temporarily suppress the corrective powers of Mother Goddess of Depravity. Back then, the worst case scenario that Klein took precaution against was if something happened to him that prevented him from contacting Sephra Castle. As such, the worms of spirit in Sephra Castle and the worms of spirit that were scattered in different places would end up losing control and be unable to save him. Once the worms of spirit he gave Roselle mutated, Roselle would know that there was something wrong. He could then use the powers of Black Emperor to distort, order, maintain the worms of spirit lucidity for a certain period of time. As for a plan the worm spirit and Roselle would come up with to save him, Klein didn't know either. This was the real reason he could hide from Adam. With this experience in the Hall of Truth, Klein knew that he would have any secrets from facing the visionary and planned rescues. Be it figured out from the past or the spot would have been seen and heard clearly by Adam. At his level, the only way to avoid it was if even he himself didn't know how to save himself. Of course, visionary Adam knew without a doubt that Klein had a worm of spirit in Marcel Gustave's back Emperor Mausoleum. He knew that the backup plan definitely came from this, but he wasn't able to pry into the secrets and became contaminated by the Mother Goddess of Depravity. It was a place that he had been corrupted by the cosmos, and though there was a prying into Rosel Gustave was like prying into an outer deity. This was the difference in level. It was precisely because of this that Klein could calmly ask all kinds of secrets and read the second blasphemy slate. On the other hand, knowledge was indeed tempting, and on the one hand, knowledge was indeed tempting. On the other hand, it was stalling for time, waiting for the other side to complete the task of rescuing him. At the same time, he didn't want to occupy his mind, otherwise he couldn't help but think about how he could save himself. As a result, Klein began to suspect that other than the unknown reasons as to why Adam had shared so many secrets with him, it was because he was trying to lure him into thinking the solution he would use to save himself, so as to find clues and stop him in advance. Therefore, the question and answer session in the Corpse Cathedral was a clash of minds. Klein had to constantly control himself and prevent his thoughts from going astray. I swear to God, I've read that exact same thing before. I don't know, I just got the weirdest sense of deja vu. And under the premise, Adam clearly knew that there might be problems with Rosel Gustave, but he didn't remind Zertil. Regardless of the reason, Klein had no intention of letting the opportunity slip. He immediately raised the Staff of the Stars in his hand and skillfully simulated Amon's Worm of Time powers. An ancient molten stone clock phantom appeared. Its face was separated into 12 different segments by grayish-white, bluish-black colors, each segment representing a different symbol of time. One of the 3 needles in the middle of the stone clock jumped, and Zertil's body froze on the spot. Klein immediately transformed into a maggot vortex that extended countless slippery tentacles. In the middle of the vortex was a strange door of light. The door of light didn't move, and the vortex swirled around it. Terrifying suction forces forcefully pulled out the bionic characteristics within Zertil's body. This was the method Palazorus had used to deal with Amon's avatar and back then. I've read this before! He had relied on the position to forcibly gather characteristics. Bit by bit, the bionic characteristics flew out at an accelerating rate. By the time Zertil escaped his frozen state in the mental exposition, he had already unable to extricate himself. He could only watch helplessly, and he was completely carried into the darkness and gloomy maggot whirlpool. A few seconds later, the vortex outlined his body again, and Klein landed to his feet on the ground. In the fog of history, Zertil's figure appeared again and again, but it was impossible for him to retrieve his bionic characteristics. In the end, it could only fade away silently, making it difficult for him to completely revive. Klein used the spirit ritual remnant effects that had completely dissipated it and directly swallowed Zertil's characteristic. He wanted to use this to lower the influence of the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. As a corpse cathedral was still floating in the sea of lightning, Adam, who wore a simple white robe, had a faint blonde beard, suddenly appeared at the edge of the waters near the ruins of the Battle of the Gods. The sea split apart, and a path appeared. It led straight to the spot which was stained with the ancient sun god's blood. It led straight to the giant king's court projection, the forsaken land of the gods. In the depths of the forsaken land of the gods, at the top of the mountain peak, there was a huge cross erected, and there was an indistinct figure hanging upside down on it. That's it. That's it. That's all. Crazy. Okay. That was so weird. I had the weirdest sense of deja vu. I was like, I've read these exact pages. I've made these exact errors when speaking. I've made that was really weird. I said errors while speaking. Incorrect pronunciations. But anyway, that's all I got.
yeah, all done. Super fun. Super, super fun. Thanks so much for joining, guys. We didn't Amorn Roads. Here's the thing. A lot happened in those that I actually wasn't prepared or ready for. I don't know what the fuck is going on with music. Not my fucking problem. Yeah. Crazy. How many chapters are in volume 8? I don't know, because I don't think there's that many left. I don't think there's, is there like 40? Is there 40 or 50 chapters in volume 8? 40. There's 40 chapters in volume 8. Oh, crazy. Oh my god, that's so insane. There's like no chapters in volume 8. Oh my god. Okay, well, that's all I have. I will do the side stories. I will not be reading that in one sitting. No, I'll probably break it up. I'll break it up into a few sittings. But I'll probably finish sooner than I thought I was going to finish because there's not that many chapters. So, that's chill. Other than that, it's really weirdly silent. Kami, where did the music go? This is weird. I'm just going to get rid of that. Other than that, thank you guys so much for joining. I had a wonderful time. I'm very excited to see what happens in volume 8. Yeah. Crazy. Okay, well, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, it did take me a whole year. It did take me a whole year to finish this book. But we're done now. So, that's good. But other than that, that's all I got. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. And I will see you guys next time, which will probably be sometime next week. Bye-bye.